Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Newbcast Podcast for the 16th of December. My name is Miss Michelle Dean, and I'm joined by, well, actually, I see a lot of new faces around here. Everyone's quiet. That was a cue for someone else to say something.
Oh, okay. Words. Well then.
Words that aren't you ranting about the Uncharted franchise.
Oh, hush.
Never.
Hush, you.
Do we have opinions about Uncharted?
Never.
No. I wouldn't dare suggest that it's incredibly boring.
Oh, ow, wow. What a way to kick this off. Jeez.
Hey, I did not bring it up. Someone else thought it would be a really good idea to bring it up. I am innocent in this endeavor for simply being honest to myself.
I think
One of these days, I'm going to run a small publication of pieces by writers, and it's going to be called Garbage Takes, and I'll ask you to come in and talk to me about Uncharted.
Oh, I like her. She can stay.
Was that too cold?
Oh, I love it.
Watching you.
You invited me here. This is your own damn fault.
This is true. So I suppose we can start going around the table and start with you. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going all right. I'm cutting feathers.
Before we get started on the games you've been playing and stuff, just a quick rundown. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you think? What do you think games are interesting? And anything else that you want to add?
My name is Amanda Hudgens. I am the managing editor at Unwinnable, a games and culture publication, and yeah, that's most of what I do. I also make some games. I'm a hyper indie developer. So I make weird arcade experiments that you can see at shows like MagFest and GDC and stuff like that. Like big shows that you're not gonna buy a 100 button fight stick at like the Walmart.
No?
I mean, you can't yet. And currently the retail price for that sucker is, I think the last time someone asked, I said $5,000. So if you want to buy it from me,
Well,
make
it's
my
1,000 buttons.
make my year, really.
That's a lot of there might be enough buttons to be able to play Elite Dangerous on that thing.
Oh, definitely. It passes the size of a standard keyboard, like a MIDI keyboard, like an 81 key keyboard. So that's me. I'm most excited by weird hardware games, probably, and what I'm playing right now is mostly things like mobile games, like Don't Trip.
Okay.
Which is a cute little mobile game, and then Hold Down, which is kind of like a reverse Breakout.
Okay.
Or like Balls, that big mobile game from like last year.
Oh yeah, see, I remember that.
If you like games with exotic hardware, remind me at some point to tell you about the local arcade that's one of the few places still running Tesla 2 cockpits from Virtual Worlds.
Damn. I'm excited about that concept, and then also there's a Steel Battalion, the old Xbox game.
Oh yeah.
That had that big like mech platform thing that you could work off of. That was like ridiculous and was like a stupid expensive peripheral that no one bought. Mm-hmm. And today the only place you can play it is like at PAX.
That arcade also has a Steel Battalion set.
Yep. That's still their home. Yeah, so that's me.
Very cool. See the hardware part, the weird peripherals and whatnot, you've got my attention with that. There's a lot of fun games that you could potentially do with it, so yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. That's it though.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Howdy.
I suppose we'll go around to the next less familiar face and welcome Theor Kraft back to the show.
Hello.
How goes?
Oh, you know how it is. You probably have some idea since since you are within range to actually throw things at.
I am. It's true. I mean, watch. Let's see if there's something over here I can. Yeah. See.
Back when the Newbcast actually ran a news site as well as, other written opinion works, I was the managing editor for that website. We ended up winding it down and retiring it, but the podcast still lives.
Got a lot of editors tonight.
See, editor, writer. Yes. Yes, this is true. And yet, the best part is you guys don't know which people I was pointing at. So there. Crafty, what have you been playing? Anything fun?
I've been playing things a little bit lazy and just sort of messing around with Destiny 2. And Unabridged Gamer should be excited to know I recently ended up getting a gun that is entirely centered around your teammates being trash. It has 2 perks that don't activate until your teammates die. So I hope you're looking forward to that.
I say this with love. Fuck you.
Oh, the shade.
So much.
Anything else? Anything fun and exciting? Anything? Has there been any other games that you've been playing?
Not as much, because I've sort of settled into an odd pattern of games that are games as service, because, oh look, that's one of the latest obsessions of this industry, is games that just never end, which is why I currently have Destiny 2, Guild Wars 2, and Elite Dangerous.
This is the game that does not end. It goes on and on, my friend. Look, that is very much the truth, and I think the thing that we're going to be talking about a ton in 2019 is going to be games as a service, and what that means, and how that affects us as gamers and such. I think one of the topics for later is also related to that.
Which means we should totally get the Unabridged Gamer to tell us about himself before we suddenly dive in.
Agreed. Elijah, welcome to the show.
Am I welcome? I'm sensing.
Oh, you're
some
always
serious
welcome.
state.
You're always welcome. Elijah, what have you been playing lately?
I'm glad you asked.
Everyone buckle up.
Someone start the drum roll and the Benny Hill music. Okay. Rayman Legends Hellsign, Dark Places, Absolver, Strange Brigade, Rush, Disney Connect game that's also not for Connect. That's horrible. Don't play it. Don't get your kids that. Give them Minecraft or anything else. And most recently, literally hours ago, and probably the best thing that I have played this week, Nazi Zombie Army Trilogy, which for the record, I have never touched beforehand, because just the name and the branding alone is like, oh, this is from the team that made Sniper Elite, back when, Sniper Elite was still not really getting its act together, and it's just more zombies and Nazis. This isn't going to be good, right? This sounds like it's going to be incredibly generic, right? Except, they have a full set of characters, both male and female, that all look badass and are equally represented as perfectly capable. There's a surprisingly good balance and a variety of enemies. Like, there's skeletons who you have to shoot the hearts out of, and there's these giant death knights you have to fight. There's a variety of weapons to use. All the traps and gear genuinely has payoff. You can set up these elaborate death traps that take out enemies. The controls are nice. There's toggleable options for those of you with reflex issues or any kind of arthritis. And it plays amazingly well with a controller, and I'm imagining it will be even better on PC with a keyboard and mouse. But just like, it's been spectacular, and they include the first 2 games for free with the latest one, and there's a ton of horde mode maps. Everything is incredibly cooperative, and they even let you know by seconds if your teammates are bleeding out how long you have, and they give you a minute, not like 10 seconds, to get to them. So as a result, you can actually work as a team and trust people to go off and do their own things. And there is even some of the best achievements I've ever seen, including one that I won't spoil, that happens when you pick up the Preacher double-barrel shotgun, which even me, as the token Protestant of the group, found very amusing. So, yeah, that's been good. But regular life has been a constant limbo of craziness, but, Nazi Zombies was good.
It's funny that I got hung up in a certain spot. You had mentioned before Sniper Elite got his act together, which did Sniper Elite ever get his act together? Let's be honest here.
Is really good. Actually, it was Dan who sadly couldn't join us tonight. He has told me that apparently Sniper Elite 4 finally got everything together. Like 3 started to fix most of it. I know a few people who swore by 3. I knew one guy who had it on basically every console he had just so that he could play it whenever he wanted to. So clearly there's some audience that's finally being sated with it, but apparently 4 is the one that really nails it and gets it working right. So I'm guessing that's, if you're going to try the series, that's the one. I played V2. Don't play V2. It is utter garbage. But apparently 3 and 4 are progressively better.
Okay, fair. I just, see, that's why it's interesting to know that, because like I said, I got hung up on the whole before they got the act together.
This started right around after it was V2 or V3. They started rolling the Nazi zombie thing. It was like, okay, this is clearly they're just going for a cash grab. This isn't going to be really good. I mean, who snipes zombies? And yet they make it really satisfying. And also, weirdly, there are actually a handful of Nazis who are still alive who will snipe at you. So you've got that to contend with. You've got these suicide chargers who've got a Titan grenade in their hand. And it's just and yes, I butchered the pronunciation. Work with me here. But just, there's such good enemy variety and level design and scenarios that it is genuinely engaging and yet very easy to pick up once you start to get a feel for it. They even made a good melee hit in a third-person game, which we all know is very hard for apparently a lot of developers to do, but kicking these zombies in the face and then kicking them while they're down is actually got this satisfying crunch that weirdly is reminiscent of stomping on potato chips. But like a badass.
Now I kind of wish Shippo
was
apparently
there. Something you can do.
Right on. Well, maybe, you know what? Maybe that's just what they used for the sound effect. Maybe it was just stepping on a Pringles can, no, it wouldn't be a Pringles can, like a Olay's or Fritos bag or something. Who knows? Who knows?
There's a cross-branding possibility that I'm sure they won't use, but yes, that is the weird thing that Elijah has been playing this week, because we all know that's part of why you come here, is to
hear obscure games.
Really weird shit.
Yeah, because then they get referred to the game club, and then I get incredibly salty with the game club choice game, and it ruins my streams.
I'm curious to see what happens when we get something that you really like and everyone else has to try that. That will be interesting.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Zach.
I suppose I would list off all the interesting things I've been playing, but it's been the same old. It's been Guild Wars 2. I've done some House Flipper and other simulation games. The unusual one to throw in this particular round is Elite Dangerous. Going back to that with the new update that just came out.
My fault.
It's her fault, but honestly, so Frontier just came out with a new update for the game. They updated some of the scanners and long range scanners. They also updated the lights in it, or like the light. I don't know if you want to call them just the lighting capabilities in general, and it looks so good. I have found that I'm enjoying doing this like interstellar photography using screenshots of the various things I've been flying by. And it's been pretty fun. It's been fun to explore and check out and whatnot. So that's been my unusual game beyond the typical games that are in my rotation. And I think I actually did a little bit of that last Wednesday with people, so they got a chance to do some flybys with me. Went by Wolf 359. There were no Borg. I was highly upset.
But otherwise, it was some Ursa Major fun.
I see what you did there. No, I had fun. I enjoyed it. I'll be going back. I had this. I have a $20 joystick from Walmart that seems to do the trick. It's amazing how much easier it is to fly around a spaceship when you have that versus a keyboard and mouse. Because doing it with keyboard and mouse is not easy. Who knew? Right. Talking about games, what about games that got some notoriety this year? What do we think about that?
Any in particular that you want to call?
Yeah, that's kind of a wide thing because like there's been a lot of great games this year, but there's also been some very infamous ones.
There have. I'm thinking more of the various games that were presented awards at, say, the Video Game Awards last week. Did any of us watch the Video Game Awards? Do we know what happened?
I vaguely remember it.
I had to help a friend avoid watching it because he was somewhat up for an award. And so he didn't want to watch it because he was stressed.
Oh no!
Yeah, well, it didn't. He did the B-side stuff for one of the B-sides for the Celeste soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was like, I can't watch, and I was like, so we went and had ramen. So I didn't watch the awards. I heard about them sort of after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in some like game related Slacks, so I was getting like the updates from that. And then I don't know, like the big games this year I wasn't like hugely into, like I like God of War and Far Cry and all of those. I found them really lacking. So like watching them like potentially win awards was like, oh okay, that's fine.
I guess the way I kind of view that is, while that is a fair and good point, it's a limited selection of what only came out this year versus like this decade or whatnot. Although Celeste did win a couple awards. They won Best Independent Game, so Best Indie Game, which, for the record, I would say is an incredibly vague like pool to choose from, but nonetheless they won that.
It's the VGAs. They lump sports and racing together, even though we've seen more racing games in like the past year or so than we have in how many years?
That's fair. No, you're absolutely right.
But the idea of lumping together all games based on how much of a budget they essentially had to build that game,
and then not
a little strange.
Yeah, like you wouldn't do that at like, so like there's this big thing with like Jeff Keighley, right, that he wants this to be like the Oscars. And you don't like there isn't like an indie award at the Oscars. Like there isn't like, the movies are all competing at the same things and the same categories. So it's really odd to be like, oh yeah, this game. But then at the same time, like I don't know like if you want to necessarily have like them all competing against each other either.
Right.
I don't know. Video game award shows are really weird to me.
They're still struggling to figure out any kind of format. And like I understand because like I'm thinking there are some indie games that could definitely compete with AAA in several areas. Like there's tons of indie action that came out recently that could have stood toe to toe with the bigger stuff. Like Hellblade is about as emotional a brawling experience as the God of War game. So realistically,
technically came out in 2017 though.
I know. I'm just using it as an example. It's just like there's stuff that could fit there, but also I know these award shows, and frankly, my big shocker was, oh my gosh, Red Dead Redemption 2 didn't get Game of the Year. My gosh, that is actually refreshing. Even though it was God of War, that still is refreshing for me because it pretty much was like, okay, either Spider-Man's going to win everything or Red Dead Redemption's going to win everything because both are big open world games. They've got very high budget stories, and they're both very safe in a number of ways. So they're pretty much going to be guaranteed for it. And Red Dead Redemption did steal a lot of the awards, regardless of whether or not you felt that it actually needed to get all of those awards. So it's just sort of like, it's one of the biggest issues with this industry in general is just like there's always one game in the year that just kind of shoves everything aside. That was the nice thing about 2014 was that there wasn't any big one. The biggest was Dragon Age Inquisition, and even then it was just getting 8s. So you actually saw awards going across the board. This year,
yeah.
I'd also say that part of the odd issue with this industry is how everything, even when you're trying to do something like an award show, loops back to advertising. Because the vast majority of what people are talking about after the Game Awards is the trailers for upcoming games.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of the jokes that came out of it that I saw people passing around is that, frankly, the Game Awards had a better hype showing than E3 did.
Oh yeah.
I mean, E3's like face planting in the last couple of years, though.
That's very true. That's very true. And I think it's got well, E3's also got this reputation of for lack of better terms, it's been known as a big circle jerk. I mean,
Yep.
As far as like Red Dead Redemption walking away with as many awards this year, I mean, they got what? Best action adventure, they got best score and soundtrack, and they got, what was it, best audio design. One of the big things I think I found with the game, and someone else pointed this out, but I think it's a very interesting point, is that it's just like, how many of you have taken a speech class?
Not since I was in like elementary school, I think.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you learn is that you do not want to be one of the first people out up on in front of the group, right? You want to either be someone that has a strong mid showing or be at the end, because people will remember you the most, especially if you're trying to make a good point. You have a great presentation. You want it closer to the end of the whole like run of people giving speeches. And games are no different when it comes to awards and what people are winning, especially when it's a fan base that's voting on everything. Red Dead Redemption 2 just came out, right?
Yep.
I'm sorry, but I do have to kind of counterpoint that while that's true, there's also some games that just came out that the VGA's basically ignored. Like, everyone is loving Hitman 2. Everyone I talk to is just sort of like, you need to play Hitman 2. This is like the sleeper hit of the year, and
but it's also a sleeper hit.
But that's the problem, is that
it's not getting the sales. I mean, I think you're definitely right in regards to the whole like later in the year, earlier in the year thing. I mean, that's a classic with the Oscars or with any other major award show. It's like, cool, like, do people even remember that Annihilation came out this year in movies? No, because it came out this year. But like the same thing with like Spider-Man, or even the question of like, did Hellblade come out this year? I don't know. This year's been Eternal. Maybe it did. It didn't, obviously, but like it feels like this year's the longest year ever. And so there's gonna be games, like, which is why I think Spider-Man didn't have like a more like across the board showing, even though I thought it was, as a game, fine. It was fine. But like it wasn't gonna get this huge across the board showing because it came out in like what, like, I don't know, whatever 16 months made up this year.
I think it was like September. I think.
Was it that recent? Because it feels like it came out in like August or June.
It wasn't that long ago. It's been well, actually, yeah, because it's been a month afterwards. They released the DLC. They've had 2 DLCs out, so yeah, it was like late September.
God, this has been a long year.
It has been
September 7th.
It's been so long. Oh my god. I'm so glad that I don't do like YouTube content and have to do a top 10 of the year, because I feel like I have to go back through a decade's worth of games at this point, because it felt like such a long year. My god.
Yeah, we're compiling
2 game of the years at this point.
We're compiling the list for like best of the year for Unwinnable this week. So like everyone had to send in their like tallies, and it's just all over the board. And it's like, wait, that came out this year? And that's even if you're not even like going back and going like, oh wait, I didn't actually get to play this game. Maybe I should play that instead.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way to keep on track of it. It's the worst time of year to play games.
Which is crazy because there's no games coming out right now. It's just a case of remembering all the games that did, and you're like, God, there's so many to go through.
Yep.
What other games stuck out this year that walked away with stuff? There was Dead Cells walked away with Action Game of the Year. Cloud9 won Esports Team of the Year. What else was there that was stuck? Of course, Game of the Year was God of War, which I'm also just as thankful that Red Dead Redemption 2 did not win it. Like, I actually I actually was excited. Like I got like audibly excited that it was not Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm like, holy shit, someone else actually won this thing.
Yay.
I was over the moon with that. Fortnite, of course, won ongoing game of the year. I think the one that shocked me, and Crafty and I were actually out doing something else, and I was listening to the awards, and they announced esports game of the year, and they announced it was Overwatch, and it's just like, really?
People are leaving it. They're walking away. It's just fallen into a rut.
Well,
To be
Yeah, but
fair,
it's got-
to be fair, it could have been more awkward. It could have been Hearthstone.
yeah, there's that.
Overwatch did have that did have that league thing. Didn't that just start this year?
It's been, I think, more than a year now, but that league has also had so many bumps in the road, so many people who have had controversy. It's like a decade of the NFL condensed into such a short span of time that the only thing that anyone remembers about the league is everyone either harassing girls underage or taking drugs or making illegal deals.
It was founded on November 4th, 2016.
Ugh. I can't keep track of this year.
No. I'm a little surprised to see that date too. I thought it was at least last year, but nope. It was a while ago. I was surprised to hear that does, because I feel like there's other esports that did really well this year, or at least got some attention and notoriety. But yeah, I guess they won it.
My thing that gets me is just, I appreciate that the VGAs is trying to be better about covering content creators, and I'm not trying to go people in glass houses throwing stones here. Just sort of like everyone frigging knew they were just going to pick Ninja. It wasn't even. It wasn't a competition. It was such an unnecessary pageantry where it was like, realistically, you should have just given him his own thing and then let everybody else compete in their own tier, because we know you're going to pick him. Whether or not you'll even watch his stuff, you knew he was going to get picked. And also, they always do such a narrow spectrum for whoever is going to be picked for these streams and everything. Like, for the one streamer tier, was like, I think I saw one woman and everybody else was just some... I'm sorry, but they looked like very generic live streaming guys, just sort of playing Fortnite, and it's like, I don't know who this person is, and if this is supposed to sell me on them, you're not doing them any service. It was pathetic.
No,
it shouldn't be.
I think you're absolutely right and fair on that. And yeah, I wasn't surprised at all to see that it was going to be Ninja that won. Like, the fact that he was even a host at one point. He did his own announcement.
Did we really, really need to see Ninja very awkwardly going through an act with Pepe the Prawn?
Pepe the Prawn should not be up acting someone else. If that's happened, you have failed.
What, were you not entertained by this?
I didn't come for entertainment. I came for awards and obviously announcements. We established there's tons of things. And I will say this. If there's one thing the BGA's nailed, it was the announcements. That new thing by Obsidian that I always forget how to word the name for. That's going to be basically first-person Fallout New Vegas, but in space.
Oh, yeah.
There was the little Jawas crossed with rabbits, the last campfire. There was Pathless. There were all these really neat things being announced, and they were presented a lot better than anything actually being given. There were awards that were just happening on the side of the screen, like as if you were talking right now. It's just sort of like, and here's the winner for this award. They didn't even hand out the award for like more than maybe 5 of the things, of the categories. The rest
They
just
know what they're doing. They know why you're there. You're not there for them.
And I mean, some of the announcements I thought were interesting the way they presented them, like the Ed Boon coming out for sports and racing games, and then they announced the Mortal Kombat the way they did. Bravo to that. I thought that was pretty well done. I
kind of really didn't like the trailer, but I do think it was fun how Ed Boon took it in stride. I feel like he himself was good.
The trailer, well, I think the trailer would have been better if they didn't have the soundtrack going with it that they did. I think that was the music choice was horrible. but the way they presented it, I thought was kind of cool. They just kind of did that whole, wait, that's not right. What? I thought that was interesting. It certainly beat the traditional way of doing an like a announcement of a game coming up. I guess it'll be interesting to see where the VGAs go next year. If Jeff Keighley is going to take any of the feedback, whether it be positive or constructive, we'll call it constructive, and make any changes for the show next year.
If I can say one last thing, I would say that they definitely improved. I remember there were years back where I couldn't even sit and watch the BJs. It was just really cringeworthy. And occasionally they had a moment like that, like they had the Pepe incident. They had Joel McHale show up and he's talking about his kids playing Fortnite, and it's like moments like that just kind of fell flat. But overall, there was an air of professionalism at the very least. There was an attempt to really make it feel more legitimate. So they're getting better at some of the presentation, but they need to actually nail the content.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're still working out the kinks. I'm curious to see how 2019 goes, though. So there's that. The other thing that we saw in gaming news is in regards to esports again, in regards to Blizzard again. For those that don't know or have heard, Blizzard has announced that they are moving developers from Heroes of the Storm to other games and projects. They're going to continue to support the game, but they're also discontinuing their esports league. Is it just me or did Elijah get frozen?
He disappeared from me.
Yeah, apparently my computer decided now would be a really great time to friggin' reboot. So now you'll be getting me from my phone for just a minute. I'm sorry, this thing is... Occasionally it pisses itself. It's like a dog. You were saying?
I think you broke the host.
A little bit.
Well, that happened.
I'm sorry. There was no warning. It's just like, okay, I decided that you're done talking right now.
Turn your phone landscape.
There. Is that better? Is this better? Is this better? Is this less awkward? Is this less
Really?
awkward?
There it goes.
Just a second. I'm going to be back on my computer. I'm just waiting for the piece of crap to actually turn itself back on. Hold on.
And this never gets fixed in soundcheck. The problems never get themselves out of the way when...
Well, it would not be a Newbcast podcast if we didn't have some type of technical difficulties going on at some point.
And now I'm back in high definition.
That's alarming.
Just gonna leave Discord on here.
Nope, gone.
What?
All right, so next subject.
Oh my gosh! I opened the Discord app and it disconnected it on the computer. Day drinking. Day drinking is a hobby, right?
Is it day?
It's evening.
Guys,
Close
welcome to the Newbcast Podcast, where we occasionally talk about gaming news and gaming content. Yeah.
Oh, take it away, please.
All right,
please.
no. So what I was starting to talk about is that, in regards to esports and in regards to Blizzard, the Heroes of the Storm support is going to be rerouted a bit. Developers have been switched to other teams, no longer supporting Heroes of the Storm, and their esports has been discontinued. And what turns out to be like Blizzard stressed that they will continue to support Heroes of the Storm, so it's still a game that's live, but it's not going to have the same amount of attention as it previously had. One of the big side alerts that are things that came up with this. I'm sorry, one of the side stories along with this is that recently there was a huge Heroes of the Storm Invitational to try to spring up a league and a competition within the game. And then after weeks of radio silence, all these new Heroes of the Storm players suddenly found out they didn't have a job. And they found out by blog posts that they didn't have a job anymore.
Apparently, no prior notification went out to essentially all of the folks that have based careers around this esports league. It's one of those things where they're in traditional sports. It's not like someone can just say, "Oh, football's canceled."
Well, they did once. There was like a football league, like a violent football league. I think it was being partially funded by the NFL. And they actually did, like, it ran for only like 2 seasons. And then one day everyone got notified that they were done. So it happens in sports, it just doesn't happen, like, I guess as often. There was like the female baseball league that ran during World War II.
Oh yeah, the League of Their Own. Yep.
Yeah, the one that League of Their Own is based off of. Like all of those things were like examples of like, yeah, today, like, it's not like you're gonna find out. I mean, unless you're in women's soccer. Because, like, they shut down the U.S. Women's League, like, in 2014, 2015, I think.
Well, I think it goes back to a problem that we've seen earlier this year, too, where they started recruiting for this, in this case, for a esports league, and people, switched their careers and went to it just to find out that they didn't have a job, and now their livelihood just got tossed up in the air. And of course, this one's right before the holidays, which makes it all the better.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we covered it back in September with Telltale, and they're hiring people up to the week of their closing. I mean, this thankfully wasn't the same week, but they were just recruiting people not too long ago for Heroes of the Storm. And
part of what we're looking at is essentially, when it comes to things like esports, where everything is so dependent on all of this private financing, etc., what sort of notification requirements should be in place, and what kind of job protection is in place as well. And honestly, the only way I can see any of this changing is if esports players and other contractors and workers within that realm start unionizing.
Which is finally happening. There's a games union in the UK now. It finally happened. It's for developers, but still, unionization is finally happening.
It's finally coming to games.
Slowly.
I mean, I think
please.
The interesting thing, the interesting thing about unions in like entertainment industry stuff is like the foundation of the first like union for like screen actors, like the Screen Actors Guild, was basically created because instead of using they would hire like sharpshooters for like shootout scenes with like people, and they would fire live ammunition at the actors, but they were just supposed to miss. And so the actors, like the first founding of the Screen Actors Guild was people going, yeah, I don't think we're cool with that, can we not do that? And like, because places would be like, no, it's fine. We've hired like really good shots, and they're like, yeah, can we not have them shoot at me? And that's why. But like, we don't have the equivalent of that, luckily, in games. But yeah, like, I'm glad to see that we're actually getting unionization without anybody having to get shot.
Yeah, that's a little alarming.
Don't get Rockstar Games ideas.
No kidding, right? Oh gosh. No, I think Crafty's right. Thankfully, none of the esports players had to be shot at either. But going a union route, because let's face it, the thing about esports or any like content creation and whatnot, they're all in this independent contractor realm, and there's no security for anyone in that realm. None. And unfortunately, some of these kids that just signed up for this league just found it the hard way that job security really isn't a thing in the independent contractor realm.
I mean, at the very least, when you're looking at things like large scale sports, they're typically signing contracts that are so utterly massive that if they suddenly get taken out of the game by an injury, they've still got several years worth of wages essentially socked away, so long as they didn't spend it stupidly, to be able to support themselves and be able to transition into something else.
Well, and I think that there's a slight fallacy in that thinking overall too, because
Fallacy.
Thank you. I think there's a fallacy in that thought process though, because like with baseball, with football and whatnot, there's a players' union, right? They have a union, so the like athletes, they don't have that same problem. So comparing them, I honestly think those are kind of apples to oranges, unfortunately. And that's true of a lot of things in this entire industry. Is large umbrella gaming industry, whether you're a gaming journalist, whether you're a gaming dev, if you're a gaming content creator, etc. There is a lot of instability in what kind of protections you have.
It's very difficult in the gaming industry in all segments of it, because we do kind of suffer from the fact that this is an industry that everyone romanticizes and desperately wants into, and the barrier for entry is not that high. So there is a degree of, well, if you're not going to do it for, under the circumstances that we want, well, then we'll just get someone else. You don't see, in this case, esports players essentially banding together en masse and saying, we will not play in your league unless you give us at least 6 months notice of any problems that may arise that we can prepare for them. Because if someone makes that demand, then they're just going to go, whatever, we'll just get other players.
And you'd have to get the big people to agree to it too, which is the hardest part. Because that was the big thing with like the voice actor strike for gaming, was we had people like Nolan North who were like, no, I'm fine. And it's like, well, yeah, you might be fine, but like, what about everyone else in every game you've been in?
Oh, yeah, it's just, that's the problem, is that whenever you have someone be like, oh, no, it's not a problem. It's not.
I'd actually, when I'd been starting to talk about the voice actors unionization and the strikes and it surprised me just how many people came out with how can they be objecting? That's such a fun job. And I'm like, these are people who are literally trying to get the rights to not have their vocal cords blown out by completely unreasonable work schedules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like they're actually coming in with like examples of like, yeah, no, this is like, I wasn't able to talk after this, or like, which is my job. And people are still like, these monsters, look at them wanting money.
No, you're absolutely right. And some of the conditions, like, and I mean, Crafty and I both had exposure to plenty of voice actors that talk about how they'll be in the booth for 4 hours and they'll scream at the top of their lungs all 4 hours, because it's, now do this like as though you got electrocuted, do this as though you got uppercut, do this as this, and yeah. So, but I mean, so that means the voice actors have the protections that they have through the Screen Actors Guild, but
I also wanted to, what I was going for with my weird rambling was, another major issue is that because everyone is going, it's not a problem, my problem is a bigger problem. That is an issue, especially in the games industry, that you're seeing, where like you have the issues like when Jason Schreier was like, oh, YouTubers are just looking for controversy to talk about. And when you see, developers going, oh, these journalists, they just don't actually appreciate what we're doing. Or you have journalists who are being just annoyed at game developers without understanding what they're talking about, or outright saying, oh, I just don't understand anything about game design. I'm just saying whatever I think. It's sort of like, there's this whole house of cards of people not just respecting each other and understanding that everyone is currently trying to make a living and trying to do the best that they can. There's going to be bad actors in every single situation, but in general, most people are just trying to get by, and it's a lot easier to do that when we're not fighting with each other.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I guess in regards to this particular topic, before we get into the other stuff, because that would have been a great segue if we weren't quite ready, or if we were quite ready to go that way. I think one of the other things that you saw as a problem with this particular announcement is that with Blizzard in regards to this whole situation, is there's been a lot of press and awareness around Blizzard and Activision and the relationship that's going on there, and Activision's influence on Blizzard and what they do. There's some people that are on the belief that this change from Blizzard to not support Heroes of the Storm is because of Activision trying to make the best of their financial situation and trying to what was the term that was used to describe this?
Cut their losses?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not the exact wording they used, but yeah. They want to reduce costs overall. Because Heroes of the Storm isn't the most profitable game.
That is one of the other issues, that it was very niche. I mean, it wasn't bad. I tried it a while back. It was like, this is fine, but just there was also nothing exciting about it. It was like, this is good. This is a B+, like a 6.57 out of 10.
But it came out at the same time as the supremacy of all these other games.
Mm-hmm.
Like being a B+ wasn't gonna make it.
It's one of those things where it was a case of, why would people that have already invested all of the time into League of Legends ever want to switch? Simply.
Right, yeah. So that kind of led to the problem to start with. But so I mean, any thoughts on Activision's involvement in Blizzard affairs, especially as it becomes more prominent in like the public eye in recent months?
I mean, is this really like I don't understand the distinction here between Blizzard and Activision, I guess. I mean, I think it's because it's really easy to think of Vision and Blizzard in this really positive light, because they've got like the fan base, and Activision is like the soulless company. But at the same time, like, I think Blizzard could have just cut Heroes of the Storm without any input from Activision. Like, I don't. Or is there like something specifically that's like some shareholder meeting thing where Activision is like, Blizzard has to cut costs? Because I mean, they've cut games before.
I think that it might have been like both sides of the equation, because Blizzard recently has been just sort of clamping down on things. Look at how they pulled Diablo 4 from announcement literally in the 11th hour. They were pulled it back and didn't announce it. And you look at how they're trying to get into mobile, which is a safer market by most standards, and you're looking at how even with games like Overwatch, there's been some mumblings that I've been hearing in my spheres that like at some point Overwatch was actually staring down the potential of a campaign, but that just has mysteriously vanished about as swiftly as every attempt within Valve to make Half-Life 3 happen. It seems like the cultures are kind of mixing, and Blizzard's becoming a bit safer. They used to even though they would make you wait forever, and they would sometimes try to do something that you would frustrate people, like the online auction house. Even when they did those things, they tended to do it because they thought it was the best call. Whereas Activision is Activision. Activision is, we will now offer to sell you Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which already has the campaign cut, and will take off $10 for you to drop zombies just to try and sell you a copy of it, because that's how desperate they are to try and get someone to buy their game. Ever since Activision got involved with them, I was worried, and Activision seems to be genuinely getting worse the further along things are progressing. There's even been some high-level creatives that walked away, like Glenn Schofield, and they're all trying to be like, "Oh no, it's fine, it's all good. I just want something different," and that may be the case, but I also don't think that it's a very fostering environment there for any sort of new idea. So yeah, something like Heroes of the Storm, it has like next to no chance if even like major sellers like the Black Ops 4, because it sold like 500 million, and that still was not enough to satisfy their shareholders, who apparently know nothing about the games industry based on whatever is said whenever we hear about their shareholder meetings.
Oh, no. No.
It's worth noting that something that people have been ranting against for the longest time is something that Blizzard, frankly, has been making their living off of for the longest time. They do not come out with games very frequently. They are the masters of games as service. When you take a look at something like World of Warcraft, which is incredibly obvious, but you have to look at how games can create that long-running service, what methods are available to them in that regard, what keeps people coming back for certain game types. In Heroes of the Storm, it's a competitive game. Running an esports league is kind of similar to when you're looking at the fact that the campaigns for StarCraft games, for example, are not that long. You can play through the single player and have it done within a week if you're pressing at it pretty hard. The thing that keeps StarCraft going is its esports league. And it's a case of it that requires a lot of investment up front to make happen. If Heroes wasn't paying off, particularly because of the fact that I'm darn certain that League of Legends is running absolute circles around it. There's a point
definitely.
There's a point at which they just plain have to cut their losses and say, we're not going to invest in this aspect anymore, and we're just going to let it sunset. But I definitely do think that it's being thrown into such a bad light because of the fact that the first news anyone got of it, including those whose living was based off of it, is the blog post. It's a case of this continuing service that they had so many moving parts and so many other outside businesses. It's completely different when you're looking at something like an MMO, and yes, the players are affected because they're invested in it personally, but they're not invested in it anywhere near the degree of financially. It's a case of if you sunset an MMO, you're more than likely taking away someone's pastime, not taking away their career. Whereas Activision, their continuing business policy is crank out more products. And Ubisoft got flack for the same thing of putting out a new release within their most popular franchises every single year. That's gotten its own degree of flack because some people do worry that if you're putting it out that fast, then quality is going to suffer.
Well, it's not just that, but also in particular with Activision is like, before almost anyone else, they were one of the very first advocates for the season pass, and they always charged like $50 for every season pass for the Call of Duty games, and they essentially tried to make it be an essential part that you needed to buy with it. And like Ubisoft, by contrast, which I'm glad you brought up, is like they've gone the opposite direction. They're like every now and then they'll maybe add more stuff or they'll have a new expansion pack. They're going more old school, whereas Activision, they always are trying to make it be so that each of their games is built like a games as a service title, but with a much more obvious expiration date. It's like they're counting on each of these games to die. I think it genuinely threw them when Black Ops 3 stayed active for a while. That it seemed like they just didn't know how to handle that. So they had Treyarch release a few more updates. They released some more DLC, but they just sort of they didn't capitalize on a potential situation where they would have gotten what they wanted. Instead,
it doesn't fit into their production pipeline at all to do that.
It just completely threw them.
Yeah, but to answer the question that was posed, I honestly don't think Activision really had all that much to do with Heart of the Swarm getting canceled. Well, Heart of the Swarm esports. Sorry, not Heart of the Swarm. What the heck am I saying? Heroes of the Storm. They need to come up with some more distinguished names. The Heroes of the Storm esports getting canceled probably had very little to do with Activision and had a lot more to do with the competition.
Okay. Fair. I think we'll let that set then. So topic. As we've discussed, and we're discussing news and things we've been talking about. One of the things that we've seen, probably in the last, decade now, we could say, is game coverage and how it's expanded. Game coverage used to be in just magazines, and they're in just magazines that came out from publishers like Nintendo Power. There's also independent magazines like Game Informer that's been around for a while now, but especially in the last decade, we have seen a lot more independent sites. We've seen YouTubers and the content they create, whether it's game commentary or gaming news or Let's Plays. You've got Twitch. You got Facebook games and people streaming their gameplay. So there's a lot of different variety coming out here. I suppose what I think would be interesting to discuss is just some of the diversity, what makes all the different platforms different. And I think we've got a great representation of the various platforms and diversity of gaming related coverage, I suppose. Yeah, I got it covered. So where do we want to start with this?
Well,
Ironically, this also kind of loops back to what I had mentioned earlier about gaming and all of the various aspects of it having such a low bar for entry and so many people queuing up to get into it. It's worth noting just how much of the coverage that you see is being produced either for free or being produced not at a living wage, because people enjoy it. There is a degree of fun involved, but you end up seeing a lot of stuff coming and going either because of the fact that people can't maintain that output anymore without proper financing, or you end up seeing places that were properly financed getting edged out by the fact that the competition is operating cheaper. And that's part of why we end up seeing some of the controversies around the fact that you can see some publications actually bending to the demands of publishers or developers simply because of the threat of getting things like being blacklisted, to the point where you're no longer going to get a pre-release copy, due to the fact that being first to market with things such as a review can make a gigantic difference as to how much traffic you're going to be getting.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy, because that's one example I always point to is when I had to review Extinction. The game in of itself didn't really matter. Most major outlets actually weren't even that enthused to talk about it, but there were people who, like, on the dot, the second the embargo dropped, even if they didn't have video footage of the game, they were just like, here's my video of it, because they wanted to try and capitalize. It is such a rabid rush. And then after that, if you go the reverse route and you talk about things after the fact, you have to hit this magical sweet spot of it's recent enough that someone will search for it, but old enough that they'll look for a new opinion. It's crazy.
You're not coming through.
Sure, I think there's a couple different things that you have to consider when you're talking about the two, as far as like the voices and people that are putting things out, which I don't know if it's completely related to what you're talking about, but I feel like that when people start looking for opinions and whatnot, they also continue to find that people that continue to put out that content and do it on a pretty regular basis, because if they don't, people will go elsewhere. Some of those places that are backed financially can count on regular content, so they can have people that will come back on a regular basis because they know the content will be there. And especially in the content creation side of things, it's really easy to burn out. It's incredibly easy to burn out. And we saw that a lot on the YouTube side of things this year, where we had YouTubers, big YouTubers, that were talking about they were burnt out. They were so ready to step away for a while because they were doing so much content. Whereas, like, the traditional publications, or even gaming websites, they have a staff of writers that can continue to pump out content, and something's there, even if one particular writer isn't contributing because they needed a break. But
Well, I do want to say that does actually happen for written publication too, though, because
sure.
especially if you're a smaller site, you're saying about working for free, especially if you're doing written content on a website that you're running yourself. You're looking at spending multiple years just kind of throwing it in the hole, hoping that it picks up. So that's its own ball of the burnout potential.
Mm-hmm.
I do find it incredibly telling that a lot of the successful YouTubers that I have seen, and people asking them how they got their start, just how many of them start with the beginning of their story being, well, I got laid off, and while I was on unemployment, I did this.
Yeah.
So it was not a case of they were being paid to do it. It was a case of they had a revenue stream from somewhere and they had time. I don't think you're going to ever find a bank that will give someone a loan to start a small business based on, well, I'm going to be a game reviewer, or I'm going to be a YouTube personality, or a live streamer. Those banks are going to laugh you out. But it's a case of people need money and they need time. And if you can't get that from somewhere, you're going to end up burning out very, very quickly on it. You need to make that balance.
And you need to have like some other kind of line of work, really. That's something that even way back before Twitch kicked off, before YouTube became a major thing, any game journalist you talk to is like, oh yeah, for years I was basically doing the same thing as an actor, and I worked it as a waitress or something.
Now that's part of the reason. Go ahead, Amanda.
With the exception of Unwinnable, I've only worked at kind of terrible sites. Like, historically, I've been writing online since 2009, so we're almost hitting 10 years, and I've only worked for terrible sites, like some ones that have actually gotten in the news for being terrible. But like, you end up with sites that are just like, oh cool, what if we paid all of our writers $20 an article? Which, for someone who doesn't know, that sounds fine. That sounds great even. That's not fine. I have seen so many articles from like writers in other fields that are like, if you're getting paid less than $300 for an article, then what are you even doing? And I have literally never been paid that. I've written for publications that have major newsprint variants. I've written for their sort of gaming vertical and been paid a third or half what the people get for writing about music or movies or anything else. And I know like maybe one freelance writer, maybe two, who doesn't have like a side gig. Like, and it could be like, oh man, I'm working as a barista, or I'm, doing this. Like, I have a day job. I've always had a day job. When I was first getting started, it was selling children's shoes and being a night editor for the worst publication I've ever worked for. And so like and wasn't the worst because of the people I worked with. I liked everyone I worked with. It was for like management and the way they treated employees and the way they got away with treating employees, because we were all dumb kids who just wanted to write about games. And you've got a series of abusive systems built on that sort of labor infringement and that concept of disposability, because behind you there's 30 people who can do exactly what you're doing, because you're writing, like, think about when I think my most popular article at that site was Bayonetta nude cosplay.
I remember that. Yeah.
I did gangbusters on that article. I got so much views on that article. For the longest time, you look up my name, and that was the only thing that popped up. And that's terrible. Like, and of course you hear all the things like, oh, you're doing it for like exposure. It's like, this is the exposure I'm getting. My exposure is if you look up my name, you see a shitty copy of a Playboy spread. And like, that's games rating. That's why people burn out. Like, what's the end game?
Just to look at it from a straight up financial point of view, if you're getting paid $20 an article and you're trying to, live in any major metro, you're essentially having to write 5 articles a day to be able to make enough to even get a semi-reasonable living. And then probably you more than likely would have to ratchet it up to closer to 8 articles a day.
Well, yeah, because you're 1099.
Yeah, because you're having to factor in taxes too, especially if they're treating you as an independent contractor.
Oh, and they are.
Oh, yeah. I only know of one publication at this point that actually has traditional staff within gaming, that has traditional staff writers that have a 9 to 5. You come in, you put in your 8 hours, you get health insurance benefits, and that's Game Informer. And primarily because of the fact that their publication is not actually making the money to do that. It's being financed by GameStop. Because of the fact that having this publication and having this review system in place helps sell games.
And it looks, and they're a great publication. They do great work, and they're fantastic. But everyone else is just left picking up the. But also, like you'll notice if you like follow the job boards, jobs at Game Informer don't come up.
Oh, no.
And like right now there's like one open position for a staff writer in games writing, and staff writer is the holy grail of games writing. Like, holy shit, I want to be a staff writer. They get paid regularly. And the only one right now is Kotaku, and every writer I know is applying for it. Every writer.
At Game Informer, you don't see those open up due to the fact too that they are one of the few that runs like a traditional business. They expect you to have a degree, they expect you to intern, and you have to be local. They have a location, they have an office.
They're in like Minneapolis or something.
Yep, they're Minneapolis, Minnesota. And you don't typically see the positions come up because they hire in one of the interns because they had the chance to test them and make sure that they were good.
And they've had some really great interns. I've worked with Game Informer interns. Like they're solid. It's way better than the internship program I went through.
I mean, I guess, yeah, you're absolutely right. Although I suppose Nintendo recently had IGN had a Nintendo editor position recently open the last few months. You're absolutely right though. Well, part of the problem is like there's so many people that want to do this, right? Whether it's Twitch or YouTube or games writing or whatever. There's so many people that want to do it. They feel like that, well, we can go to the bottom dollar because, look, if you want $300 for an article, that's great, but we're not going to pay you that. This kid over here will write it for $100.
That kid will write it for free.
Yeah.
The only places I have ever seen pay anywhere near that much for an article was Polygon.
Well,
I think Polygon pays by the word, I think. And their rates are pretty solid. I've never gotten through their pitching process successfully. I'm a terrible pitcher. I fully admit it. It's why I moved into editing full time and working for a publication that I knew would respect me even if they couldn't pay me super well, because I do get paid at Unwinnable, but not well.
Fair.
But we're working on it. We got a subscription drive.
Well, but I mean that's just it. And I mean, unfortunately, these kids don't realize that. Oh, yes, this is great for exposure, but exposure is a reason for death, right? If you ask a coroner, exposure is a cause of death.
Yeah.
This is no different. This is literally no different. And so on the other side of it, like on the YouTube side of things, or Twitch side of things, like where we're just doing content creation, whether it's gameplay or game news or whatever, we've got nothing backing us up. You know what supports, like like this show, for instance, and the stuff that because I got to pay money to do some of the stuff to get this thing published in the places I do.
Yeah.
What supports it are the people that I see hanging out in our chat right now that are watching the show, that come in and support the channel, and that is, I mean, if it wasn't for the audience, then I would be all sorts of screwed. And the thing is on YouTube and Twitch, it's really easy to not have that audience and not have that exposure at all.
Yeah.
And it can run you dry too.
One of the things you have to consider, though, too, is that, quite frankly, you have the audience that is being able to support the fact that this is not a full-time stream. This podcast, all of it is not full-time. What is getting each of us through the day are other jobs.
Yeah.
And I think it says something, too, that I know that Miss Michelle Jean has gotten recommendations of, oh, you could totally grow your stream if you just did it more often, if you just did it longer, if you just did it, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even as we were at TwitchCon and there was a growing your stream as a business, one of the recommendations that had come out of one of the people was, yeah, I managed to corner the market on the primary game I was streaming by doing 12-hour days. And it's like, that's fantastic for you. Normal people can't do that without a revenue stream already in place.
Or like living with mom. Like, like those are kind of your options are like having someone subsidize your living some way.
Right.
Like a supportive partner, or because like even with my day job, my partner is the main reason I can afford anything, because he has a regular job, he makes good money. I don't. And so without that payment, I would probably be back working at Stride Right selling children's shoes, which was a terrible job. Never sell children's shoes.
One thing I will say, though, is that platforms like Kickstarter or Patreon or even Twitch, with their assorted systems in place, it is very nice to see that we are seeing more methods in place for the audience to put their money where their mouth is and support directly the content that they want.
Yes, but also speaking from the YouTube side, the thing is, as wonderful as that is, and I mean that as someone with a Patreon, is such a relief. Also, you gotta make sure that the platforms that you're on will let you do it and don't make it harder, because that's one of the things that I hate about YouTube is that they made it so that you can't even just have a link to Patreon until you've met this specific set of criteria. And that is another issue, is that while those of us who stream or put out YouTube content, while we are freer to do what we want, that there's content I've covered on my channel that I know I could never pitch to a website. They're never going to want to talk about Homefront the Revolution. But as awesome as that is, that also means that there's a lot less that's got our back. Twitch is better about it. YouTube is not. I will wholeheartedly say, I'm pretty much on YouTube simply because it's the most ideal video platform to put your stuff on, not because I like YouTube. And that is another major issue you have with these things. And it's something else we actually wanted to touch upon with this is things to improve for all the different coverage. And like, I could talk for a day about everything that YouTube could probably fix. Because
oh, yeah.
I love it. And there are some amazing content creators. But the problem is, going back to what I'm saying about lack of respect for different things, basically any typical, like, straight up just traditional games journalist that I talk to, I have to convince and explain why you should actually treat YouTube seriously, because they look at it, and I mean, even if I'm signed out of YouTube and I look at it without being in my account, now at least for me personally, I have filtered it down. But if you don't do that at first, it's reaction videos and PewDiePie and just the toxic layer of bullshit that no one really wants to watch. That's sadly mostly being advertised to children, even though it's really toxic. And
I mean, that's the front page of Reddit problem.
Oh,
Like,
there needs to be their content filtering.
Well, and the thing is like, as far as like you're mentioning PewDiePie and people like that get that attention, is because they're really easy to pick at and go, see, this is why this is a horrible platform that is just absolute garbage. I mean, the Jason Schreiers of the world will absolutely demolish PewDiePies of YouTube, because look at how horrible this person is. And that doesn't help the platform at all either. When truly there's plenty of people on YouTube or Twitch even that are good content creators. They're good people that are doing things with the industry as a whole, and you don't see it. And that there, you're actually seeing a like newer form of content creation butting heads with an old school form of content creation in the form of game journalism.
Yeah, there's a lenience towards focusing on the negative instead of the positive. You see every now and then, like, oh, look at this streamer who raised this money for Twitch, or look at this YouTuber who's a nice grandma who plays Skyrim and stuff like this. Like, you see that every now and then, but it's done as very light fluff pieces.
Yeah.
The best example I can think of was actually, I think it was JV Gwaltney did a piece for Game Informer about video essayists on YouTube who talk about games and who try to like do serious think pieces. That is the first piece of media I've seen actually even recognize that they exist.
Yeah.
Like, you've got your Race Fix and you've got your Noah Caldwell Gervais, but you need to find out about them. You completely find out by word of mouth. And when you get to that point, you see that these people are at least actually successful. They are doing stuff where they get views, but it's made too arcane and underground. And I even feel that about like written sites, because just finding one that really fits you and that you like, it takes work. You have to search and hunt so hard for an age that supposedly is the age of information, where you can find anything at the click of a button. It is actually very hard to find what you are looking for.
Here, let me present you with this haystack. Find the needle. Go ahead, Amanda.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if I agree that like video essayists are like super hard to find, because I think that like say like a site like Critical Distance, which does the weekly roundup of like the best game writing in right now this week, they have an entire section usually dedicated to like video essays where they'll get their errant signals, their Joseph Andersons, like the guy, I think it's Joseph Anderson, the guy who wrote like that 6-hour thing on Bloodborne. I don't know.
Oh, jeez.
I used to watch it when I was quilting. Like, I'd be quilting, and in the background, he would
It's
be
fantastic stuff for when you're doing something.
Yeah. Well, it's great because it's mostly just like, here's clips of Bloodborne. Look how pretty it is. I'm going to explain to you the complex themes of Bloodborne for the next 6 hours. Please feel free to skip through to the parts that interest you. Okay, buddy. But I think that there's some butting heads, but I think Jason Schreier is going to butt heads with anyone with a pulse. That's just who he is, as far as I can gather.
Fair.
I mean, I like video essays personally, and I'm basically exclusively a written publication kind of gal. I don't have a lot of content that isn't written. But I think that there's also like this. I think there's a little bit of this tacit misunderstanding between publications on what they want and what they expect. And I think that also like there's this part of the butting heads, if it's as bad as it seems, is probably because for a lot of written content creators for a while, their jobs were being just straight up threatened by the failed Facebook algorithm thing that was saying that like videos were the only content that mattered, and if you wrote something, it had no value and no one was reading it. And it turned out that Facebook was just like pumping up their video numbers, and so there are like entire sites that went down because publications were like, because they were just like, okay, cool, we were going to fire the entire newsroom. And it's like, so I think you're running into some of that, which is like I think that's some of the sort of inherent failure between the two. Because I mean, there's also stuff like that dumb ninja stream from a couple of weeks ago where he was playing Wendy's in Fortnite.
There's also
what?
Am I the only? No, that was a thing. It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was a ninja Fortnite stream with Wendy's. My partner started watching it, and I was like, "Why are we watching this?" And he goes, "I don't know, but I saw clips of it. It was the thing. I think that it was Wendy's, the Nugs for Carter kid, who was like a meme last year, and Ninja.
Oh God.
I think playing Fortnite. So like, you I don't know. Stuff like that is kind of hard too because it seems to like devalue it, but it's basically the equivalent of like news articles that just talk about how excited we are about like the potential name for the Xbox for the PS4, the PS5 or whatever. Like what will the next Xbox be named? Doesn't matter.
Right.
It's kind of hard to avoid that though, because one thing that it seems like games journalism isn't necessarily willing to admit about themselves is this is an entire industry that is centered on a product. You're not reporting on world events, you're not reporting on politics, you're not reporting on things that are going to, in most cases, are not going to drastically change someone's life. It's going to come
Yeah.
down to people are trying to figure out where to put 60 to a couple $100.
There's that, but I mean that is the case with any entertainment media, right? Like your movie, like a movie is almost like we view movies as art. And I mean, to be fair, games were established by the National Endowment for the Arts as an art within the last 10 years. So they are technically an art, but we view movies as an art, but really they're a commercial experience. But I think that doesn't like excise them from like media like coverage. But I think that that's the hard part is like we've got this interaction of like hardcore people who care about like dissecting media, which is where you get like publications like I think Unwinnable fits really well there. But then you've also got like consumer advocacy, which Unwinnable doesn't give a shit about. To be totally upfront, because like you're an adult, make your own decisions, read IGN. Like and IGN's going to be your consumer advocacy and stuff like that. And I think that that's part of the issue is like deciding where these sort of things like split apart and become different.
Plus the different language within all of these different ways of talking about things, because how you present a game on Twitch is completely different to how you present it on YouTube versus how you present it in a podcast or on a traditional text review, which is something that I've actually noticed. Speaking of Kotaku earlier, that is something that you can see them kind of struggling with, because like their highlight reel thing went great because Chris Person, the person behind it, he is really good at that. Whereas one of their more recent additions, I forget his name, like he tried to break down all the PlayStation Classic games for a YouTube video. He didn't script it, so as a result, there wasn't a text alternative, and he apparently just did it all on the fly. So it was like,
You're not talking about Tim Rogers, are you? No, that's Kotaku.
I think that it might have been Rogers. I'm blanking on the name, but like it was a really awkward situation of there wasn't a lot of planning, and it felt very much like something that you'd see someone just getting started with making gaming videos would do, which is just sort of a thing. Once you've done both sides, you'll learn how they can kind of intermesh, but the very starting point, it leads to a lot of, oh, this thing that I used to do in text is just not going to work here. There's even like just simple things as like jokes or formatting completely alter, and especially with the advent of all this video stuff, is that you have to show what you're talking about, and that adds actual work hours. And I mean hours, because if you need one frigging 30-second clip and you're digging through, say, 40 hours of footage, that is so much time wasted that you would not have had in a text thing. And there are a lot of traditional people who are used to just doing text who don't want to go through that work. And I've seen alternatives that sometimes fix this, like The Escapist back in the day. They had someone write a text review, and they had someone else who was a dedicated video editor, and occasionally the writer would do the voiceover. Sometimes someone else would. I think that's probably the best you're going to get, but a lot of outlets, especially if they're not traditionally print, they are going to struggle with that because they don't have a staff. It all just kind of comes back around on itself.
Yeah, that is Tim Rogers. That's his style. He's been editing, but that is his style. Yeah, that's just how he does this.
That's a weird style.
He's also been probably doing this longer than any of us. He's like 40. He's so old. He's shockingly old. But no, that is actually his style. He always does these things that sound kind of off the cuff. But he also he actually does spend a lot of time working on his stuff. I've listened to a really good thing from him when he did Bad End, which is another podcast where he talks about like the amount of work that goes into those reviews and that content. That is a stylistic choice, and it seems to be working for him, I guess. That video has, I don't know, 30K. It's not bad. But I don't know, like there's a lot of work to it. I've been trying to help some friends get their content onto video because I can video edit. It's part of my day job. And I've been like, no guys, seriously, just write a review. I'll make you a video. That's all we need this. Like, you don't gotta do anything else. Just write it down and I'll make all the video parts for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can record the audio and then we'll call it a day. Because they're like, I'm not getting jobs because I don't have any video content.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess I wonder. I just think about the time that goes into some of that too. Like I mean, even you're helping with that. That's still a lot of time that's going into a project. Some people I don't think realize how much time actually goes into some of the projects that we work on.
No, they don't know. They don't realize.
Not
like I think. Someone got mad at me for I wrote a negative review a couple years ago of the Mad Max game because it was garbage, and a bunch of people got really mad at me about it. But like everyone was like, "You barely played it." I was like, "Hun, I sat down on like a Tuesday and I didn't get up until a Thursday because I had to play the whole because it's an open world game. You got to finish it."
Yep.
Like, and people don't realize like they don't give you the game until like 2 or 3 days before release. So if you're doing one of those release like things, then you're writing like a day of or 2 days before.
I'm glad you're bringing that, 'cause that's another thing. Is like the sheer level of extra work that comes from when they make you do that close a time gap is nuts. I can't actually go back to Alien Isolation. I love the game, but I cannot go back to it because I had to binge that motherfucker in 4 days.
Yeah.
I had 4 days to get that entire game done, and it kept being like, "Oh, sorry, we're not ending. Oh, sorry, we're not ending." 5 times.
Oop.
It raises my blood pressure just thinking about the game now.
And that's an interesting way to consider the development or the content creation in the content development side of things for those platforms versus say this one on Twitch. An example is I just did Between the Stars, which is still in Kickstarter and early access. No, it's not in early access yet. They're still doing the Kickstarter. They had the demo out though, and all I had to do was open the game and talk about it and make sure to mention those 2 things to get the key. Right?
Yeah.
And in that regard, like I probably had the easiest workload, but then what I do then, while that part might be easy, the other stuff I have to do for the channel is different from what other platforms have to do, and you end up still using the same amount of time. There's still so much. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the time thing. It's just because it's a hole. It's a black hole. We've passed the event horizon and we're sucked in. No lights getting out.
I mean, there's I was really impressed by, I think it was Atlas for the last Persona game. Like they actually gave reviewers like a month to like play that game, and I was shocked. And that might have been because it was like translating, they were like finishing translation and stuff, and so they had that time, because normally from like a development side you don't have that time.
Yeah.
Like you can't it sucks for the reviewer, but you don't have like a month to give them. You have 3 days because the game just got through all the patches and finally works, and here you go.
Sometimes not even that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's still waiting for that was an issue with Call of Cthulhu. I couldn't use a keyboard because they were still having a glitch there, so I had to play the entire game with a controller whether I wanted to or not.
Oh. Eek. It's funny that you mentioned Persona 2 and how long, or Persona 5, excuse me. Also, because our regular co-host, Dizzy, who's not here for the last 2 months, has been a running joke that all he plays is Persona on his channel. And that's because that's how long the playthrough is taking for him.
It takes a while. And then most of the people I know who play Persona are like, well, you've only really played the game when you finished it 3 times. It's like, but you spent so long playing it. Play a different game.
Yeah,
Please.
Yeah, no.
Unless there's a cheat code that lets me just skip every battle. No.
I mean, I know I'm not a JRPG person, so like I haven't tried any of those games. I appreciate that they exist, and I've got several friends who love them, but they're not for me.
That's fair. All right.
That brings up one last thing that needs to be said about content creation. It's something that come up, and it was actually something Miss Michelle Jean accidentally reminded me of, which is it can be very easy for a streamer to talk about a game, but the thing is also that's something that's concerning developers is that they can like that sometimes they put down serious money to have a game live streamed and played, and if that person isn't into the game, it is one of the most awkward wastes of money that can possibly happen. There was I think it was Everspace or some other kind of flight game, and they had this guy who was playing Fortnite, and he literally basically went, and now because of a sponsorship thing, I now have to play this thing for 2 hours, and then just it was
Oh.
nails on chalkboard board bad. Not even trying, which is another issue that we have in content creation, where you have these people who talk about a game, but you can tell they're not trying. They're just looking to smack it, which is an issue with independent creators of any kind. But still, it just is.
I honestly think that's a failure on the marketing department if they
Yeah.
are not connecting their product to someone who is genuinely going to pitch it.
Or like requiring the person to play the game even if they don't like it. Like
Exactly. It's one thing if you hire someone who plays flight sims to play your flight sim. It's another to hire a Fortnite player simply because they have such a large audience and you're shotgunning your footage out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's that. But I'm speaking in terms of people not liking it. That's even an issue. Like everybody's allowed to have opinions, but it's an issue, especially with YouTube, where I won't name names, but there's even a few channels that are fairly large and that are popular where I have seen them play a game. They will say things about a game that I blatantly know that's not the reality. That's not how that goes. You're just playing it poorly because you're upset about something the company did or something like that. And it's a problem. And it's even a problem when you're working on just the professional side and you have to review something, because my quasi day job is reviewing mobile apps, okay? And one of the biggest pushes it has had for me is that I have had to play a lot of genres that I really personally would never seek out on my own. I've had to do like hidden object games and all sorts of really weird strategy stuff. I even had to play like a MOBA-ish game at one point, and I really don't like MOBAs, but you have to have a certain amount of professionalism when you're playing something you don't like. And that's something you don't always see. There are some critics where you can tell if they're talking about a genre they care about, they will give you the full 9 yards. If you have them play something that they are not familiar with, if they are not super into it, you can tell, and you can tell that the criticism is poor and that it would have been better to have someone else have this conversation, somebody who actually will at least try and give a damn, even if they still don't like it. If they at least tried, that would be more so. And it's really something we're struggling with even now.
Well, I think so. As far as that last piece, I think it really speaks volumes about like a content creator's ability to work with a sponsorship. The thing is, if you're gonna be that shitty about a sponsorship, then you shouldn't be taking it. Like, I get that you want to get paid. But if you can't do any type of enthusiasm for it, if you're actually being paid for it, then don't do it. Even large, a gaming channel that I used to watch a lot of, he got to the point where he would only select, like, he did a lot of games, but he would only choose ones that he felt he could give a fair shake to. And if he didn't like it, he wasn't going to take it because he knew that he would just absolutely shat on it. He knew better. And I wish more people considered that in that regard, because without actually following the FTC guidelines, people can tell when they're not when it's an advertisement, especially if you're not trying. If you're like, why are you even playing this if you hate it this much? Because I got paid to. I mean, I don't know. I agree with Crafty's statement that there's, especially when there's keys being given out, there has to be some type of vetting. And if you're going to shotgun it, then that's the risk reward gap you have to worry about. Is you will get people, if you shotgun your key out to people for content creation, you are going to get people that just destroy the whole presentation of the game, and you just got to hope that there are people that will actually give it a fair shake. There.
Absolutely.
That said, I think that is a fantastic spot to take a break. Don't you think?
Water.
Water is great. So, guys, get up, stretch, move around, but don't go too far. The Newbcast will return in just a short bit.
Except Amanda, just because she's going to still be cutting stuff, so she's not actually leaving at all.
I'm just gonna keep cutting stuff.
More feathers.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Newbcast Podcast. Hopefully you got your break in there. That was a weird flash. Yeah. So, got a couple more things to cover, I think. There's another bit of news that we didn't cover during the news section earlier, so we're going to circle back and talk about that because it's kind of interesting, and that being Epic Games and their storefront, and the fact they're competing with Steam, and the cut, and
Can I introduce it?
please go.
Okay, because this is one for me, especially staring down the prospect of potentially getting into game development is so fucking exciting. And yes, I know I'm going to be putting a lot of dollars in the swear jar today. Bear with me here. It is awesome. So, first of all, context. Steam has a 30-70 split between themselves and developers. So they get 30% of the profits percentage-wise. This has actually been a serious problem for some indie developers. Like, there's one who recently has said that if they had what Epic Games is new 12 to 88 percentage, if they'd had that, they would have had $350,000 more in funds to continue supporting their game, to fund events, to hire additional staff. It's, despite seeming like a very small number, it's a huge deal. To top this off, now, with Epic Games' new store, which is going to be curated and not open to anyone, which is something that Discord is apparently actually going to do. They're going to open theirs up to self-publishing, which, as much as I appreciate them trying to do the itch.io route, I don't see that ending well. I think you need some level of curation to not end up like how Steam is right now. But Epic is going to be curated. They've only got a few games out right now, but they're going to give out a free game every 2 weeks for the entire first year of its existence, starting off with Subnautica and then next Super Meat Boy over the holidays. And along with this much more ideal 12-88 split on the revenue, they are also dropping any Epic Games Unreal Engine licensing fees, which were already pretty small by that point, about 5%, but still, you don't have to pay any if you go on their platform, and they will allow games that aren't based on Unreal to be on there. They outright said, yeah, Unity's fine, or your own engine. Whatever you're using, you can, so long as we greenlight it there. And to top things off, they are going to be rolling out over 2019 all of their tools and plugins for allowing cross-platform play for Fortnite. So we're staring down the prospect of a game engine that you can use without having to know a scripting language, just understanding Blueprint, that is extremely flexible now, that can run on virtually every device, including VR as well as mobile. And you'll be able to make it so that all those versions work together if you're doing multiplayer or if you're just, trying to make stats and everything carry over. It's a really exciting potential thing. And apparently people are enjoying working with them. Copy Stain canceled Satisfactory on Steam. They're only releasing on Epic Game Store now. Hades is going to have a full year of exclusivity on the Epic Game Store. That's from Supergiant. Bastion, those kinds of really impressive tier developers. And there's even some AAA stuff that's kind of like, that might be interesting. We might be interested in doing that and that is the big thing, is that everyone is kind of getting tired of doing Steam. And I mean, like Bethesda and Activision have been trying to push their own launchers. Ironically, as much as everyone mocked it, Origin did a pretty decent job. They've gotten to the point where they're actually starting to compete with Steam slightly in certain ways. We've talked about that before on past streams. But what Epic is doing here is potentially a really great thing actually for indie developers. It could be essentially become the high-end itch.io, which would be really fantastic. It's really exciting to see what comes next because they're going for the throat, and I want to see what happens next.
You're muted.
From a consumer standpoint on that, while some of this competition is great for developers and consumers, some of the exclusivity, seeing exclusivity is not very consumer friendly. I feel like that's just, because I mean that's another launcher you've got to download and have it available. So that's what Steam, that's Origin, that's Epic, that's the Blizzard launcher.
Counterpoint: almost everyone has an Epic account by now because so many of them are playing freaking Fortnite. Even if you don't play on PC right now.
That's generalizing.
There's a lot of people who do though, and that's the thing. They've already got an install base that is set up so they can hook them in. Whereas Origin was like, we're going to mandate and require this right out of the gate with no other options. And the thing is, if your game developers are getting more money in, that is good for you as a consumer because that means they can make more things and they can fix that problem that you complained about. They can actually release more patches. There's a lot of quality of life things that will improve, even if it means, yes, I'm going to have another freaking launcher. I'm as annoyed by that as everybody else, but if it means that we get a higher quality of service for our games, and it means we see more games get released, is that the worst thing?
The other counterpoint that I would like to offer is that there currently is no evidence that this is going to be better for consumers. Part of why Steam became a darling is because of their massive reputation for their sales. It, simply put, the biggest thing people are going to notice is how much money they're spending. And we don't actually know whether or not any of these savings are going to be passed on to the consumer. And the fact is that Steam has been around long enough that regardless of Fortnite's success, the install base is still going to be far larger on Steam, to the point where a number of developers have outright said that no matter how good a deal they were being offered by Origin, if they didn't get on Steam, they were not making a living. So Epic is going to have to work incredibly hard to be able to put together a consumer base large enough, and are going to have to essentially make sure that things are affordable enough to be able to compete, especially when we are already staring down the fact that people have picked apart the Epic Games Store privacy policy. It is not in compliance with the GDPR currently. Their privacy policy is whacked as far as anything in the European Union at the moment. They're going to have to take a long, hard look at that and make sure that they're catching up, or they're going to run into some serious problems very soon.
Mm-hmm. Which is fair. I'm not trying to say it like as if I think it's the second coming. I am, so as I said, I'm excited, but there are problems that they're going to have to address. But the thing is that we've already seen evidence that people are, as much as Steam still has a hold on people, there's also a lot less enthusiasm for it. Saying about the install base, yes, there's an install base. I have a substantial Steam library, but I don't really actively go to Steam, even for the sales you're talking about. The actually better places to get sales for Steam games tend to not be on Steam anymore. You go to Green Man, or you go to Humble, or anywhere else, Fanatical. There's all these other places that have basically made their business to actually offer better sales than Steam. Valve has become very complacent, and if nothing else happens, if Epic actually lights a bit of a fire under Valve's ass, if they start to actually act like a company instead of a random user forum that just happens to profit off of their application, that would be fantastic. It would be great to see them actually address some things. And there's some stuff that Epic is doing that is exciting. I've seen some that, like, I saw Lambeer being very happy that they're not doing traditional user reviews and they're not including any kind of forum because they don't want to encourage toxicity on their platform, because that is a major issue with Steam, is that while it has tried to offer a lot of features for community to interact, a lot of those features have been misused and they have not moderated them at all. And it just reaches a point of, yes, Steam is the centralized one. Yes, I don't see Steam like going away in the next 5 years or something. It would have to take a seismic shift to do that. But I do think that they need some serious competition, and I would really like for there to be a new storefront that's actually nicer to developers, because that is one of the biggest issues, that Steam just kind of grinds up a lot of studios. And there's been also a number of studios that have said that they have actually preferred going to the Nintendo Switch versus ever even releasing on Steam, because they've gotten better sales. Because as much as it is a struggle to be on an exclusive platform, there's also incentive for people to get your game when there isn't as much competition. So it kind of goes both ways, and it's going to be very interesting seeing how that plays out.
So I feel like that's multifaceted, right? As far as like the sales and whatnot, it was a reputation that Steam had built. It doesn't mean that they continuously do it, because you're right. If you go to Humble, or if you go to Green Man or whatnot, you're gonna find better deals. But that's not to say that people still won't go there to find. It's like within the next week and a half or so, probably I would actually guess that sometime this week, the winter sale will start. And you know that people will flock to the platform to see what goes on sale and what to buy. It doesn't change the fact that exclusivity does not do anything good for consumers. Especially if you have a consumer that has limited resources available on their machine, right? If the machine has limited resources and it's being clogged up with launchers, they're not going to be able to download the games that they're exclusively offering on one platform over another. You have to give them some other incentive. Like, if you want people to buy from Epic over Steam, give them another reason. Don't twist their arm into that one spot. Give them another reason to.
Well, that's actually something that I'm seeing. To go back to the one with Hades from Supergiant, one of their main incentives is that when the game is out of early access, it will come to Steam. But for a full year, it's going to be available to experience on Epic Store, which is something that I've actually seen itch.io games also do. Recently, there was another one, Beacon. Beacon actually had a very early sale where it was like, okay, the first 1,000 people can get in, you can get on the ground floor, you can experience the game as it's first developing, and then later it'll be coming to other platforms. So there's actually some developers who have already been doing some stuff like this.
Limited
Overland, for example. Overland from Finji Games. That's, I think, currently just the only way you can play it is through itch.io's early access program, which has like a name like Butler or something. I forgot what it's called.
Yeah, there's.
But that's like early access, exclusive to a console, to a certain platform. That platform being itch.io, because itch.io is tiny, but their revenue split is still the best of any of these platforms, because you get to choose what the revenue split is.
Oh wait, we just had him on the show a few weeks ago. Whose name escapes me right now. He was on itch.io. But so
Nelson?
No, not Nelson.
Alec,
yes, thank you. I mean, he's using itch.io for his games, so he's probably taking advantage of that. It doesn't change the fact that, so in regards to what you're looking at with these games that are in early access, or this like beta type game status, that's still a limited time exclusive game. I want to see another reason. If I'm gonna buy a game from Epic over Steam, I want something else. I don't want to be strong arm into it. It's basically what I'm saying.
Name what would actually sell you.
That's an advertiser's job.
No. I'm asking, as a discussion point, what would sell you?
Um,
A good return policy would probably have
That would
me
help.
more willing to take the risk.
Oh yeah, that's actually one of the things Origin did early on. Like, hey, would you like to have a reasonable way to deal with this?
Of course, Origin lost a ton of points for how many times it crashed my computer.
Yeah.
They really need to make that launch.
or just that, or like consumer friendliness. Like, I could not tell you how many times I had to try to get a hold of Steam support for something. It was an absolute pain in the ass. It took me a year to take care of it. If there was any better customer support, that's something. But that's a platform versus a game. As far as like a game and what they release on it,
I mean, the attempt to like combat toxicity is kind of nice. If just like, I don't know, I was looking at a platform recently and they were like, we managed to get rid of toxicity. It turns out it's not that hard. And like the answer is like actually moderating things. But like, realistically, I don't think Epic's gonna do that. Because it's easier not to. That's why Steam doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why none of these platforms do it. Like, it's really hard to content moderate. I mean, look at the best moderation on the planet right now is on Facebook, and it's terrible. Like, because it's really hard to do and it's expensive. So, I mean, it's nice that Epic's trying it, even if it's like the Club Penguin route of like, we just won't let you talk. But I don't know. I'm not super psyched about the Epic platform. I don't care. It's not going to substantially change the way I game, and it's like, I don't know. Like, I wish it was more interesting. I think I'm hung up on like the exclusive thing is like, okay, that's I guess something to buy, but like what's it doing that Steam isn't already doing? What's making it so vastly different that I'm gonna do this? Like, is this just Google Plus? Where it's got like one tiny feature that's like moderately better, in which case, cool, I guess, but like I'm not moving. It's hard.
The thing that I'm very hopeful about is that the better revenue split is going to allow smaller developers to be able to make more. If they're making more money, then they're going to be able to do more different and fun and experimental things. But it's going to be a while before any of that actually reaches the consumer in a very tangible fashion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess the reason that I get hung up on the exclusive part and why I think that's hard to deal with is that's one of the big things about console gaming that I harped on for a long time is get it first on PlayStation. I don't want to get it first anywhere. I would like to have my option where I play it. If I have my option where I play it, I'll buy your damn game. I just want to be able to play it.
Okay, but you gotta be fair here that there's a reason that exclusives exist and that some of these wouldn't happen if you didn't have that exclusivity deal. That like a number.
Most likely, that's why Hades exists. I would almost guarantee that Epic's paying for it.
You have to get funding from somewhere, and the thing is, a lot of these exclusive games, like you know how Sony pushes out these really impressive tech demo kind of games. That money didn't come from thin air, and I guarantee you, while some of them make their money back, a bunch didn't. Especially like if you look at Sony with the PlayStation 3 generation, they threw out like close to 40 different exclusives for that system. Maybe 10 of those legitimately made their money back. But the thing is, even if some of those 40 didn't make their money back, they pulled more people into the platform, which allowed them to strengthen it further and keep things moving. I don't like exclusive either. I don't like the fact that I'm going to have to wait till a PlayStation 4 finally hits $100 so that I can experience Spider-Man, so I can experience Horizon Zero Dawn. But the fact of the matter is, I might not have those games if that didn't happen. It might not be the most consumer-friendly thing. I'm speaking as a budget gamer here, but even if that's the case, I understand from a business standpoint that it's not as easy as just trying to be a dick to consumers. It's a number of things that have led to this point. So that's why I'm not going to be nearly as upset about that. I'm going to be more like, okay, what you got then? What have you got that can sell your platform to me? So the titles are going to matter a lot, and that is one of the reasons that I'm actually interested in the Epic Store, because Hades looks really neat, and they've got a bunch of other ones that are going to be coming to PC first there, and it's like, you know what? Yeah, if they do actually offer a sale, if they do ensure that these games are properly supported and everything, I might give it a try, because, I mean, if it's something I want to play, I'm gonna seek it out, and it's carrot on the string mentality. It's business.
Well, okay, so in that regard, as far as like a platform versus platform on a storefront, it's probably going to help a lot is a curation process.
Yep.
I think that would drive a lot of consumers So talking about Steam before in their glory days, we'll just call it the glory days, is because the Steam storefront and the store in general is curated, right? Like if you got onto Steam, you made it. You made a good product. You made it. And that isn't necessarily true now, and that's why people easily gripe on it. If the platform's curated, and if they go to the Epic Game Store and they go, I know this is a good game because it's here, I know this is a good game because it's here, then it's just a case of finding that would be a great selling point.
To be fair, back in those glory days of Steam, as you put it, we ended up seeing a lot of independent developers that were going broke and starving because they were in the line. They were in the queue so long waiting for curation. Because
Steam Greenlight, Steam Greenlight was a mess. You could be on Steam Greenlight for 2 years, which in game dev time is insane.
Oh,
like your game, you could make a second game.
There actually were a few cases where that happened. I remember it, and it's. Steam has never been very good about it, and curation is a difficult thing, but we're starting to see other places get better about it. Like, GOG's had some issues on their social media side, but you can't deny the fact they've been pulling in new games, like, every week, and they're almost always ones that someone in their audience wants to play. And that's actually, I think, if Epic wants to pay attention to someone who's doing a good job of subverting Steam, they need to look at GOG, because as much as GOG is a niche market, they are doing well at the niche market. They are doing beautifully, and they are copying some of their things. Like, they're doing the giveaways, and they're trying to nail some of the things that are exclusive there, and that really has worked for them. And GOG does do the sales, and they tend to go for sales that are lower than Steam. Right now, like, I could pick up The Suffering, and it's like $3. That's a lot cheaper than a lot of stuff that does go on sale on Steam these days. Typically, the most you see on Steam is a 70% off, because you don't really want to lose too much because of the specific revenue share you're looking at. There's a lot of things that Steam is just not really on the uptake with. Even when they tried to implement live streaming, it was actually more awkward and unpleasant to use than anything that any other platform has offered, which is another thing that Epic could do really well, because they got the whole Fortnite thing. So if they make Twitch streaming well integrated, that could be a fantastic thing. Because I remember when I had Kraft playing through Black Ops 3, I would occasionally have her stream it so that I could see what was going on, so I could give advice. And like, it is such a cockamamie system, just having one person watch another person through Steam. It is so many levels of ass backwards. And yet, they cite it as this big feature. They're planning on making their store pages have live streams, which is a horrible thing, especially if you have a limited internet rate. So, like, there's a lot of stuff that, as much as Steam is established, as much as there are people invested in Steam, there's also so much that's just turning rancid, that you can have a lot of people paying attention to your platform and still lose them. I mean, just look at what happened with Microsoft with Xbox this generation. They had everybody buy whatever stuff you want to call about down there, and they lost it in like a year, and they're still paying for it. All you need is someone to hit the magic bullet, and you're screwed. So Epic might not be that magic bullet, but the fact that it's opening up this much someone's gonna find a way to do something better than Steam. I firmly believe that someone's gonna find a way to do some of these things better than Steam, and it's gonna become noticeable. And as much as everything fracturing won't be great for all of us consuming wise, it will potentially mean better games and a better overall landscape, which with so many people getting into independent development will impact more people than it would have in, say, 2010.
Unfortunately, with the Epic Game Store, I'm going to say that with the curation and getting the game in front of people, it's unfortunately going to be a case of I will believe it when I see it. I want to see if they will invest the necessary resources to be able to get people through the queue, be able to make sure that only the best, most functional games are getting in front of the audience, but I want to see the developers that they claim they're going to be helping with all of these different revenue splits. They need to make sure it gets delivered. So I'm very much in a state of wait and see with the Epic Game Store rather than being excited.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah. I guess it's a wait and see on that one. I put it on my points of what I think. It's a part of that. We'll see what 2019 brings, I suppose. So, in the vein of game sales and sales processes and thought and whatnot, one of the other things that we've seen recently is a change in the sales that we see in AAA titles. In particular, there's some games that we're starting to see now that have like a $40 front and then a season pass, versus some games that still have the $60 plus season pass. So you're spending anywhere from $60 to $100 for a game, and we're seeing some variety in the pricing and the tiers for these pricing on some of these games. What are your thoughts? We'll just go round robin a little bit and talk about it. Your thoughts on the idea of like a lower barrier to entry with season pass versus full price 60, 70 games, or if there needs to be a change in pricing or what have you.
Also, don't forget that also there's the matter of fact that we're also seeing these pricing schemes influence sales, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Within months of release, you could get all of the content for the price of what it was at launch. Just get the base game, and it's sort of like, what really is the base game at this point when you're buying a game, because of the way they're kind of breaking it up now.
Sure. Which, I mean, that's a valid point too, and I think we saw that with a few other games too. How fast did Fallout 76 fall in price on sale?
Oh, Fallout 76.
That thing didn't last. I think it was within a month. It was on sale.
It was on sale within a month.
A couple weeks, yeah. So,
and we're seeing.
Yes.
We're seeing this happen more and more, especially with rough launches. If any game doesn't meet its ideal sales criteria, I'm wondering if this is for shareholders or to get consumers in. You're seeing a lot more games discounted. Like Battlefront 2 had the same thing happen in 2017. It's been on sale so much progressively that it's already $10 if it's on sale now.
You're seeing that really with like multiplayer games, right? Because those games don't exist without an audience. So if you're not kidding that thing, you don't want to be Evolve. Like, what was it? I think right before they like killed it, Evolve was like hitting like 300 players. That's a death knell for a game like that. You can't survive that. So like with Fallout 76, it's like, yeah, the tail is important on like our sales strategy, but like also if we don't have anybody playing, I mean, it's a Spartan game anyway, right? Like you max out on amounts of players like really low per map or something. Mm-hmm. But even then, like that's painful. I don't know. For me, good.
Miss Michelle Jean actually used to play a lot of Primal Carnage. And it's one of those things where with those, you're shaking your head. Did I get the wrong game or?
I'm trying to figure out which game you're talking about. Primal
The
Carnage
dinosaur
doesn't have
one?
The dinosaur
Okay,
one.
that's Primal Carnage. Okay.
Yeah, and that was a competitive player versus player game. And when you hit the point where you're having ridiculously long wait queues because it cannot find players to partner you with,
Yeah.
then the game's dead. Players are content if you're going to do a multiplayer game. But also, correct me if I'm wrong, even with the single player market, the vast majority of the sales that it is going to have in its lifetime actually happen within the first 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what the tail is. So in terms of like sales, you have this graph, and it looks like it has a tail, and it's got this huge bump in the first thing, and then right after that, there's a deep like decline, and then it just like levels out. And
Yeah.
the tail is like the worst thing in the world for like selling shit because okay, cool, what do we have like because you can get some bumps in it, you can hit like your season pass content, maybe that'll get you some more players and stuff like that, but usually you're definitely never hitting the same high that you got on day one unless you're Flappy Bird and then your day one sales didn't exist and then you hit like sales like 6 months out from release. But unless you're Flappy Bird, and most games aren't, Flappy Bird was barely Flappy Bird. So unless you're that, you're not hitting that you're not hitting those. You have to sell something within the first day.
Sure.
You also have to make sure that you're essentially making back all your money, everything that you put into it within that first initial push. That's part of the reason why marketing budgets are so insane. There's always going to be residual, but those scattering of sales that you're going to get after the initial push are essentially just going to be this thing that no one really counts on. And it's just sort of a, well, hopefully it's going to, cover the cost of maintaining the servers.
Yeah. And I think you're right there. I think having a lower barrier to entry does help a lot with that, though. Obviously, you don't want to go too low where you never stand a chance to make back what you've lost in advertising and game development and such. But, I mean, if I was to buy a game that's $30 and then the season pass that gave me DLC later on was $20, I'd be more inclined to do that than paying $60 and then have another $40 tacked on to get the DLC for it.
I mean, between me and Miss Michelle Jean, look at what happened with Destiny 2, actually. We ended up, I ended up initially playing it when Blizzard announced that they were giving away the base game to all Battle.net users for free. And I was happy because the game itself, not that great. It plays incredibly well. The story's kind of garbage.
Kind of.
The consistent review of every Destiny game. I don't know why I like this, but I played it.
It plays really well. The story came across as kind of pretentious and incredibly sparse, but I also didn't spend any money on it. And then I was like, you know what? It plays well enough. It's got that fun aspect to how it controls. I can play it with my friends. Sure, I'll throw down $30 for the season pass, or not the season pass, the expansions, which I ended up getting as a gift, actually. So all told, only spent $30 on it. But the fact remains that if I had been in ground floor, it would have been $60 for the base game. It would have been $30 for the first expansion, $30 for the second, and $30 for the third, and they ended up
third, actually.
What was that?
Yeah.
40 for the third, plus there's the annual pass with extra stuff for that expansion that was like another 30.
And if I'd paid full price for it, I probably would have been really pissed.
Yeah.
Just because of how little there was there. But at this point, they already knew that they had their base locked in. What they had at that point was what they had, and they were going to have to do something extreme, like give away the base game for free to get more players So I do think that in the end, they're kind of having more acknowledgement of the fact that A, other players are going to be content when it's a multiplayer game. B, if you didn't get this person to buy it in the beginning, you're not losing anything by getting it to them cheaper later. You're possibly gaining. And C, this is such an anti-consumerist product on the whole. But the return policies for games are just terrible, no matter where you go, that you have to give people a lower risk in order to take it on.
That's well, yeah. I mean, that's one of the that's one of the things I came up with. Circling back to Bethesda and in Fallout 76, it was a. Do you suppose they did this because they didn't have to deal with the return policy of, say, well, Steam, because their return policy is actually half decent now. I think overall, I think, look, if you can have a lower barrier to entry, even if it means that you end up charging for the DLC or the season pack, if it ends up being the same cost, but that barrier to entry was lower, you probably will find that more people will be inclined to spend the money. It's a lot easier. Like, if you're going to spend $100 in a game, it's a lot easier to go, I'll spend 40, 30, 30, 30. Or 4, 30, 30. 4, 20, 4, 20, 20, 20. Right? 40, 20, 20, 20. I'd be more inclined to do that instead of doing 60 than 40.
It honestly just seems like an evolution of the free-to-play market, where the barrier to entry is free, and then try and nickel and dime small amounts out of people, either via annoyance and selling them convenience, or when you see the less objectionable model of getting them to spend small amounts of money for things like cosmetics and stuff that doesn't really affect the gameplay nearly as much.
Oh,
instead, we're seeing we're seeing a slight evolution of that, of just saying, okay, we do need your money, we really do, but will you work with us if we're asking for less of it?
Well, it's not only that, but I'm really intrigued with just this idea of starting at that lower number so that they can actually resist outright sales more. That's something that's interesting, because that's an interesting way to project the image of it all. And we've also seen from the other side, from games that aren't doing games as a service, with stuff like Hellblade and Echo, where there's these smaller teams trying to put out a polished product, but on a smaller scale, so that they can make their money back, be able to do the next thing, but they aren't going to try to have all the money. And that's offering up some interesting avenues of just finally having games be more flexible like they used to be during the PS2 generation.
I've always said that I don't honestly think that the next revolution in gaming is going to be VR, or is going to be 4K, or is going to be a consistent 90 FPS or anything like that. I think the next revolution in gaming is going to be the ability to make a high quality product for cheaper. Because you constantly end up getting the complaint and justification from companies about how, yes, we're doing all of these monetization schemes that you guys have already told us you really hate because we have to, because it's getting more expensive to do the thing. And I admired Ninja Theory for, in the case of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, for the fact that they were really trying to put out a high quality product for cheaper. And I wanted to see them succeed, but the one thing that I will be incredibly critical about is that I don't necessarily think they succeeded in the way they thought they would. Because yes, they put it out for cheaper, but a lot of their dev diaries boiled down to, so we tried to do this in this really cheap way, and it totally failed. And then this other company came in with a solution, and they were nice enough to let us do it for free. That's not a maintainable business.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and whoops. As far as the idea. Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, weren't they able to cut corners also because they're like a studio that does other like motion capture or something?
Oh, they do tons of outsourcing.
Like that's their primary business.
Well,
like
part of
or something like that. Like that's really hard to express how expensive that is on its own. Like the reason you don't get that level of animation from other places is most places don't have in-studio motion capture. But if your studio like makes money doing that, like I know motion capture studios in Kentucky are like they can really rack up like just like hours and hours of like stuff for that.
Yeah, part of what, the example that I gave of something that failed and they had to go outsource was actually the fact that their facial capture, they were trying to do these really super high quality, captures of emotion to make sure that they were telling the story that they wanted to. And their attempt at a cheaper method of doing it actually bombed. And a outside company that specialized in that essentially used them as a test bed.
But also, I don't mean to just bring up Hellblade because we are seeing other examples. It is a thing that is starting to happen slowly, like Larian with the Divinity games. Those have been $40. Focus Home Interactive pretty much has made a business now out of releasing games at a budget price and being a publisher that's basically can sit alongside the AAAs without ever really going there. Because it's not just, I mean, I've mentioned Vampire, but there's a lot of other RPGs for years now they've been publishing either digitally or physically that are like, they never see the sales numbers of a Mass Effect game. Sure as hell nowhere near anything Activision gets. But they found a way to make it a feasible model and tap into niche audiences, which goes back to what you're saying about how it really comes down to being able to hit your market and be able to be affordable about it. And really, I don't understand why more people aren't paying attention to them because they've made these games that critics will be like, yeah, you get a 6 or a 5, but they still sell well. That should tell you something. You should be looking at these people and figuring out what they're doing, but instead everybody's just trying to copy whatever MOBA or Battle Royale thing is happening.
It's catching the craze. I mean, that's what the industry does. I mean, catching the craze is why you saw Daisy in the zombie survivals. You saw it in MOBAs. You see it now in battle royales. Catching the craze is something you're going to see. Trying to convince any type of studio that's a larger studio to take that risk to create the new trend, they're not going to do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that they're not trying to create a massive trend. Trying to be a trendsetter is one of the best ways to set yourself up for failure. Most of the games that have set the trends were completely accidental. When Modern released, Infinity Ward wasn't even planning on making a Modern Warfare 2. They wanted to go right to Infinite Warfare. They were planning on going to space next. They didn't expect to start off this huge chain of everybody going to Baghdad and every first-person shooter known to man. So, really, the way to do it, to be successful, is to not be trying to get that huge thing.
But also I'd say that games like Divinity are not replicatable. And that's frankly because they're niche markets. Like you're talking about that's a CRPG, right?
Yeah,
or whatever.
It's been doing 2 CRPGs now.
Like they're hitting a niche market and they're hitting it hard. Like those audiences are like, damn, we really want this specific type of game. That's why they're getting 6s from IGN, and that's why they're still selling well, because that audience doesn't care. It's the same people who get really obsessed with those what's those games where you run around and you like kill like 400 people in a single fight?
Divinity. Yes.
Yeah, like Dynasty Warriors. Like Dynasty Warriors releases exactly the same game every year for the last like 15 years. And they do gangbusters when they release because that audience is like, oh hell yeah, I get to be Lu Bu and destroy everyone with a spear. Like those are like not replicatable. Like if as an indie game, because I saw this argument recently with someone yelling about like Mario Kart. Like, why doesn't anyone release a Mario Kart? Because you can't just release a Mario Kart. Like those games are hyper specific. They have an audience, and that audience like is there for that game, and that's why they're not replicatable. That's why you don't see people like going into that space. I mean, also their premier, in the case of Divinity, you're talking about what's called like a premier indie title, and so a premier indie title is something that hits like the $40 range. that you're not getting, like, your average indie game doesn't price that size because they know that they're not going to hit it. Like a Vlambeer title is what, like $15-$20?
Usually less than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and it's almost always on sale, so you're never paying $15-$20. Binding of Isaac is like 30, maybe 40, but that's like the most recent Binding of Isaac on the Switch.
What I
It's
want to
like-
say though is that while you can't replicate precisely what happened with Divinity, the thing is, CRPGs as a genre, as something that people have tapped into and made successful, there's actually multiple developers. I bring up
Yeah.
Larian, but there's been more. So it's like you can't specifically copy like Mario Kart. I agree, but you can come up with something in that vein that taps into a certain thing in a different way that actually excites people. That's actually kind of what Divinity did. While it did become a Kickstarter success story, the thing is also it went about things very differently than most CRPGs you can find. Like, they had an emphasis on multiplayer while still keeping the story component in mind. They tried to make the combat more hardcore and more like traditional Dungeons and Dragons, whereas, say, Pillars of Eternity is basically Baldur's Gate with a new story. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, which is what
There's
people want from Pillars of Eternity.
So it's like there's different things going on there. I'm not trying to say that everybody needs to specifically do that. I'm trying to say the opposite, that you can try and tap into these niches, and there are niches that are underserved, and there are ways to play with it, to actually explore it that do something different. Like with Echo by Ultra Ultra. Echo is, I mean, it's made by the people who made Hitman, and it's very stealth-centric, but it broke a lot of stealth gaming rules. Like, it was very sci-fi. It was very focused on a linear set of levels. It didn't try to do the thing that everybody else is doing, where it was going bigger. The Echo went very small, and that genuinely worked for it. The fact that it was this very small, very precise thing, targeted in a very exact way. And I'm not saying, once again, I'm not saying that you need to make Echo. What I'm saying is that just like with Larian, Ultra Ultra with Echo went for something that they knew could be interesting, that they hadn't immediately seen, but they knew that there would be an interest for, which is something that this new area of the market can support. We can see games that try to do things that you wouldn't be able to sell, because you wouldn't be able to sell a vampire game to EA or to Activision. You wouldn't, at best, maybe Ubisoft, and it would never get a sequel from Ubisoft because it probably wouldn't sell that well. But Focus Home has made that happen for them, and Paradox has made similar things happen for them. It's a very specific sort of selling yourself that, like I'm saying, not a lot of people are paying attention to right now, and it's something that I personally am going to be looking into more, because just they found a way to not be big but still be successful, which you need at this point. There's enough big dogs. We don't need another big studio or publisher that's... I'm still amazed that THQ Nordic is trying to be. They're just buying up every licensed IP on the market and are just sort of like, we're going to bring this back. We're going to bring this back. I have no idea how that's going to pan out, because as exciting as it is to see all these things potentially coming back, it's a question of if you've got the right angle to sell them.
Yeah.
But yeah, Focus Home. Focus home, people.
Focus
Pay attention
home.
to Focus Home.
So, with the trends that are changing, I guess what we would have to do to know what will really happen with this in regards to it is see which games do better in the near future, right? Which ones, if something's $60, $70, is that going to do better than anything that's a lower cost, even if it is considered a AAA game? That's really going to be the way to tell. And I'm sure if even a group our size starts watching that other industry trend watchers will be doing the same thing. So we've been talking about a lot of things that have been, we got to see what 2019 brings us. But what about 2018? In particular, what was your game of the year? Now, we talked about that this was a long year, so we have a lot of games to choose from. But what was Elijah's 2018 Game of the Year? We'll start with you.
I see you're using me as a perfect filibuster to buy time for everyone else to choose. But yes, I have two
That's
picks,
exactly what I'm doing.
Okay, I have two, and one is going to be very obvious because I just referenced it a bunch of times. Vampire. It is probably my favorite RPG in years. It is a fantastic blend of Yakuza, Bloodborne, and Sherlock Holmes, with storytelling that actually makes it harder to go back to certain BioWare games that I've loved for years because it just genuinely does humanity and interactions better. And it's got one of the best morality systems I've ever seen and one of the most fantastic romance arcs I've ever seen that genuinely ties into the plot for once instead of just being get back in the Normandy, we'll bang. You have to develop a relationship with someone. And they don't go for trying to make it be sexy. Like, you know, how Andromeda was like, oh, we've got a scene that's like softcore porn. It's like, okay. Vampire has me genuinely caring about Lady Ashbury and like wanting to be ensuring that she's okay and being heartbroken at the game's bad ending. And let me tell you, right up there with Infamous 2, the bad ending of Vampire will make you feel like such an asshole. And I love that. I love that there's that much conviction to do it. Plus, unlike a lot of games right now, it has a conclusive ending. I mean, it leaves it open for sequel. There's a number of potential scenarios where they could kick the game back up. And the one I think that is most likely is the neutral good ending. But out of those 4 endings that you could potentially get, all of them give you a satisfying, okay, if there's never another one of these, we're good. Which is a problem that I'm glad Don't Nod is addressing because that was something that kind of was an issue with both Remember Me and with Life is Strange, is that their endings, in the latter case, just from hearsay I understand, didn't really stick the landing. But overall, just like, it's even going to be coming to Switch at some point. The console version doesn't have as good a frame rate, but I played on PC, ran fantastic. I know one person who had problems with it, but otherwise, it's just been a beautifully done experience. They even add a story mode so that you can just have an easier combat, or you can have harder combat, which is always a good option. And yes, there are subtitles, and yes, there are rebindable controls. And for the love of all that's holy, if you do play Vampire, I have 3 very specific things to tell you. Never use Blood Claws. Blood Claws is the worst power that you could use in the game. You'll want Coagulate that freezes enemies in place. It drains them of blood. It's the most valuable skill you can have going in early. 2, you can respect your abilities at any time, and it's basically no cost, which is really good. 3, you can spend blood points for certain choices regardless. So even if you don't have the experience points on you, it'll just make you go into negative XP. These are the 3 things that the game fails to convey to you. Everything else is very clear and nice, but these are the 3 things you need to know. Very quickly, because I do need to wrap this up, because other people do need to talk. My other one is Battlefield 5, because fuck me, that is a really good game. From the single player that I have actually revisited multiple times. I can quote Craft on this. She's talked to me while I'm replaying Nautilus for like the 3rd time. And the multiplayer is so good. It encourages team play. Your squad can pass around ammo and health, and there's rewards for it. Even their first Tides of War thing, they're going to follow the entire World War, adding new content and maps over time. The Tides of War are basically special objectives. The very first one is like, okay, you're going to be doing support roles for this to complete these challenges. So it's really hammering up. You can build instead of just destroy the environment. Finally, we see situations where constructing and building is useful, and being a support player, not being the best first-person shooter player, doesn't mean you can't play Battlefield 5 well. If you're a damn good medic, if you can use the movement system, because you can now crouch sprint, you can do prone and kind of crawl around, point your gun all the different ways, it's so much more like actually having the abilities of a soldier, but still gamified enough that it's not a horrible, horrifying massacre. That they saved for the single-player campaigns, including one that actually has you playing as Germans in a tank. That is probably the closest I've seen any game to nailing what Halo Reach did right, but also making you have a protagonist who realizes, oh shit, I'm a Nazi. And I'm now realizing just how bad that, and I love that there are very few Americans. If you're tired of seeing G.I. Joe in every World War II shooter, the only instance of Americans thus far is in the German campaign as enemies. So that, and I believe they made sure of that because you can hear them throwing slurs and insults at you. You can hear just how much they hate your German ass. And that was such a good creative call. It is very impactful and very well done. They did fantastic work overall. It's got some of the best sound design. You can have prosthetics. You can be whatever ethnicity or gender you want. And just, it's so well done, so well balanced, so fun. Yes, it didn't have a ton of content at launch, but Battlefront 2017 had a bunch of content and a lot sucked. They're only just now getting to good content. I'd take a sliver of much better content versus a boatload of crap. So, yes, Battlefield 5, Vampire, they're both on sale right now because, like the other games we're discussing, Battlefield 5 didn't have the greatest initial sales. Apparently, more people are actually playing Battlefield 1 right now because they're just that dedicated to it. But, get them. Plus, Battlefield 5 is going to eventually not only have a Battle Royale mode that's focused on teamwork, so that will offer something a bit more interesting with that, but also, it is going to be getting a Warframe-style PvE co-op mode where 1 to 4 players can actually team up and take up randomly generated missions, which is completely new to the series, and I'm so excited for that. And I think I've bought everybody enough time I'd like to think, so there you go. Vampire, Battlefield 5, 2018, the year of the V.
All right. Amanda, what was your game of the
Yeah.
year?
Tetris Effect in VR.
Okay.
Without question, it was. I mostly played mobile games, Hold Down, Evergarden, stuff like that. But Tetris Effect in VR was easily the best game I played this year. It was Tetris, so obviously great, solid gameplay with. And I've played a lot of like the Tetris adaptations, like the ones on web and other games, and Puyo Puyo Tetris, and like everyone trying to reinvent the wheel. And this is the first iteration where we're like, we can't reinvent the wheel. It's Tetris. What if we just made it stupid pretty to look at? And that was probably the smartest decision that Tetris has had in 20 years. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's really nice to look at, and it is really playable. And it in VR was actually better than it was even outside of VR. And I say that as a person who can't handle VR at all. Like, it makes me super sick. And Tetris Effect in VR was perfectly zen. It felt like sitting and playing and like reading a book in a quiet corner.
Very cool.
So yeah, Tetris Effect.
Tetris Effect. Okay.
You have my attention.
It's a game that I would argue actually doesn't play super well outside of VR. Like, it actually was really hard for me to look at. I get eye strain really easily, but I played it in VR because my partner was like, "No, you'll love it." And I tried it again, and I was like, "Holy shit! No, this is actually great."
That's awesome. Sometimes you don't realize some of the games that are going to be really fun in VR. It's really interesting to hear that. So cool.
Yeah, no, that one, and I get the same sort of zen thing from Thumper, but I think I am alone in finding Thumper zen. So.
Okay. All right, Tetris VR. I'm also now very interested. So, Crafty, what was your game of the year?
Oh, you're gonna hate me. I don't have one. I've actually been looking over the list of games from 2018, and
played that.
as far as I can see, like, none of them are standing out as of the one. I don't even know if I've played any games that actually released this year, particularly after I got driven out of essentially games writing for reasons. I honestly have not felt the utterly pressing need to be up to date.
Yeah.
That also circles back on some of what I was saying about anti-consumerist policies. Is just I do not feel the need anymore to throw down a pre-order or $60 for a new game that is just released. I would rather wait long enough for a multitude of reviews to come out, for a additional DLC to come out, for them to prove that the DLC will come out and won't just get canceled, even though they've taken your season pass money, like a certain Final Fantasy game. Especially with the Game of the Year editions that you end up seeing 1, 2, 3 years later that have everything bundled in. I honestly have not been playing any games that were released this year. I've been playing older ones. I'm going back through my backlog.
So, Game of the Year is none. I guess I'm in a similar boat, although I've played some games that did come out this year. I will give an award to one because I felt like they deserve it as far as actually taking a chance on it, bringing it to our market. And I would go to Capcom's Monster Hunter World. I thought Monster Hunter World was a gorgeous game. We've seen other Monster Hunter Worlds that come to the American market, but often enough they're very cartoonish and come off almost childish. Monster Hunter World does not do that. It's a lot grittier. It looks gorgeous. The attention to detail in the game looks great, and the ability to play online and have other people play along with you is also really cool. Being able to go after some of the bigger monsters that exist in the world and having your friends be like, hey, I need your help, let's go do this together, was great. I'm glad to see that they were willing to take the chance, because there are other Monster Hunter games that are in the Japanese market that have this very realistic feel to them. They never made it here to the American market. This one did. And I thought it deserved it. I thought it was a pretty damn good game. My only issue is I didn't get to play it as much as I would like to have, because it took me a while to figure out how to let my system cool down, because it got really, really hot. I won't talk about how my CPU got up to 80 degrees Celsius. That was a scary moment. But once I figured that out, yeah, I played a lot. I put a good chunk of hours into it and enjoyed it. And especially when it starts going on sale, like if you have any inkling to check out Monster Hunter World, whether it's on PC or if it's on Xbox or PlayStation, please consider it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a pretty fun game. So that'd be my 2018 Game of the Year. That said, I think we made it to the end of the show.
Yeah.
It was a long one, like this year.
Nobody died. We get to there.
But before
knock on wood.
Oh my gosh. But before we go, just a quick reminder that for those of us that are still available, we'll be hanging out in the Newbcast Discord. The link's already in the chat. If you're watching the VOD or listening to this on iTunes, unfortunately, we will not be in the Discord chatting actively when you hear this. But we are in general. We generally get to see stuff. But for those of you that are watching live on Twitch, we'll be in the post-show lounge, hanging out and chatting about things. So feel free to jump in there. Additionally, before we go, we're going to go ahead and shill ourselves a little bit and sell out. It's basically, we're going to talk about what we've got coming up on our channels and or sites and or what other places that we're creating content. To start with, we'll start with our guest this week. Amanda, what do you got coming up?
Hi.
Where can we find you, et cetera, et cetera?
Probably the best place to find me is at Barely Concealed. Is probably at Barely Concealed on Twitter, and also that's probably the best place to find me. And then I've got MagFest coming up where I'm showing off my weird controller, and also I work for Unwinnable, and we are currently doing a subscription drive. So if you like games writing and you want to help support games writing, becoming an active subscriber of the site is actually probably the best way to do that. And that's unwinnable.com. But that's me.
Cool.
They put out good stuff, and I don't just say that because they publish mine. They generally do some fantastic work, and if you are tired of just being given a score for a review and never hearing anything about a game, Unwinnable is your place to go.
Very cool.
We do try.
I think that counts. Cool. So there you go. Did and the links are being dropped in the chat as we go. Uh, should we hop over to Crafty? What do you got coming up? Do you have anything coming up?
Nope. I have a loose schedule with Unabridged Gamer to do some collaborative stuff, but at the moment the dates aren't completely set. So
Yeah, it's
just,
gonna be.
just keep an eye on his channel. Keep an eye on this channel because sometimes I get dragged into doing these podcasts.
Fair. Elijah, what do you got coming up on your channel?
Well, in 2019, I will be dragging Craft's ass into discussing about a number of things, but also for the end of the year, I'm going to be videos dedicated to talking in depth because yes, that was me being brief about Battlefield 5, and I'm going to be doing a series of videos highlighting specific things about Vampire. That's going to be going on into 2019. On top of that, video about the Connect is on the horizon in the future. And I'm going to have so many So I Just Played because I got Xbox Game Pass for that $1 deal. I've been playing so many weird things just to see. Some of them were fun, like Sniper Elite, and some of them were like Disney Rush, which shall haunt my memories for all time. But you can always find me on YouTube at Unabridged Gamer. I will be coming back to doing live streams on Twitch after the holiday season. We're going to be playing some more terrible games that no one else is playing. Likely going to also finish up Raccoon City there. And yeah, you can usually find my written stuff at Unwinnable and Game Critics. So, and at Paradigm Fallen on Twitter.
Cool. Well, then for myself, I suppose I should talk about what I got coming up. Of course, Guild Wars Tuesday will be up this Tuesday with Hippopotamus. Wednesday, I think I might go back to do a little bit more Elite Dangerous because those pretty light effects. And then we'll see what other there was some talk about trying to do some collab stuff with a couple of the Newbcast folk, so we'll see what happens there. Next week, of course, Christmas is on Tuesday, so there will not be a Guild Wars Tuesday on Tuesday that week because of the obvious. I'm going to try to sneak in on that Monday to do the stream then. On Tuesday, though, if you are a individual that is looking for a stream to call home for the day and need a place to go, I know our friend Hippopotamus is doing a 12-hour stream that day for folks for Christmas, so feel free to check that out. Yeah, just watch the Discords and Twitters, Miss Michelle Jean on all of those, of course on Instagram, on Twitter, on the Discords, etc. And I think that will do it for us. So for Amanda, for the Unabridged Gamer, and for Theorcraft, my name is Miss Michelle Jean. This has been the Newbcast Podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.